"Give the master bedroom to us, and you can sleep in the basement tonight." My son said it so lightly, right as he rolled his suitcase through the door. Behind him, my daughter-in-law glided past me in dark sunglasses with that appraising look like someone touring a house she's about to buy. They brought 4 suitcases, a box with an electric cooktop, a few potted plants, and the familiar line, "We'll just stay for a bit. Don't worry." I stood frozen in the living room, the place that used to be the nest for me and Evan, watching them touch and rearrange my late husband's things. My heart went cold, but my lips still held a smile. Under my hem, my fingers gripped the safe key. They thought I was a compliant old woman who would bow my head and accept it. They didn't know I had quietly installed cameras. And the one who would leave this house in shame would not be me. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Claudia Hart, 66, living in a quiet suburb of Asheville, North Carolina. 6 years ago, my husband Evan died of a heart attack while tending the backyard garden. He left me just enough life insurance, plus the savings I'd put away over 30 years working part-time at a fabric shop called Cotton and Thread. I used all of it to buy this house, the first home ever in my name alone. I didn't choose it for luxury. I chose it because it felt like Evan. In late afternoon light, the warm wood tone pours across the living room. The small, tidy kitchen has a hook for the floral apron he once gave me. Every brick, every wall is the result of years I lived carefully and decently. And in 6 years of widowhood, I learned to enjoy being alone without feeling lonely. In the mornings, I walk with a small neighborhood group, 5 women in their 60s and 70s. We talk about everything, new TV shows to the apple pie someone's husband used to love. I learned to use a smartphone, set up WhatsApp, Facebook, then Instagram, where I post photos of the rose, garden out back in bloom. Every 2 weeks, I go to a little salon on Main Street to keep my hair a chestnut brown. The color, Evan said, made me look like autumn smiling. I thought my life had settled back into a calm rhythm. Until that afternoon, when the door opened and Dylan walked in with Harper. Dylan, my only son, 35, used to be gentle and sweet, but life wore that down. After Evan died, he started changing, calling less, visiting less, and whenever he did, it was to borrow money. I could never turn him down. A mother, even knowing her child isn't perfect, keeps believing he's just going through a rough patch. But this time was different. He didn't bring the usual awkwardness. He brought the unnerving ease of someone who had a plan. Harper followed, her heels striking the wood floor with firm, even steps. She didn't look at me like a mother-in-law. She looked at me like an asset to be evaluated. "Oh, Claudia, this house has so much potential," she said, opening doors, glancing at the walls and ceiling, then stopping at the old Tiffany lamp what Evan and I bought on our 30th anniversary trip. "If we switch to LED and change the metal frame, it'll look much brighter." Claudia, she didn't call me Mom, not even Mrs. Hart. Just Claudia, a stranger's name in my own house. I swallowed and smiled. "You must be tired. I'll set up the living room so you can rest a while." "No need," Dylan cut in, voice firm. "We'll take the master. It's bigger and closer to the bathroom. You can stay in the basement for a few days." I heard my own thoughts shout. The basement? The room where Evan kept garden tools, cold and damp? But I said nothing. I nodded, the reflex of someone far too used to giving way. That night, after they shut the master bedroom door, I sat in the kitchen, listening only to the vent fan and the slow clink of a spoon in my chamomile tea. I tried not to listen, but I heard Harper's laugh, Dylan's voice. "Yeah, I know. The place is old, but a few updates and it'll sell for a good price. We need to talk her into it, or at least get her to sign a few papers to make things easier later." Then they laughed. I sat still, gripping the cup until the heat was gone. The next morning, I went on my walk as usual. Maeve, my closest friend, took one look at me and asked, "You look worn out. What happened?" I told her everything, how Dylan and Harper had suddenly moved in, how they acted like homeowners, and that line about, "You take the basement." Maeve stopped, studied me, then said, "Claudia, that house is yours. You worked your whole life for it. No one has the right to walk in without permission. Don't let kindness blur your judgment." I nodded, but deep down I felt something heavier than fear, the sadness of a mother losing authority over her own life. When I got back, the living room was different. The cream sofa I bought during a spring sale had been pushed to the opposite wall. The floral pillows I loved because they matched my garden roses were tossed in a corner. The wedding photo of Evan and me taken in a field of tulips in Seattle had been taken down and replaced by a gray-black abstract print. "What do you think?" Harper asked brightly. "Much more modern, right?" I looked around the room where Evan and I drank tea every evening. Now it felt cold and unfamiliar. I answered softly, "Yes, it's modern." Harper all but took over the kitchen. She moved all my dishes to the highest shelves, then brought in a flood of organic items, expensive olive oil, cold-pressed juices, imported cheeses arranged like a model condo in a magazine. Whenever I started to cook, she'd appear with a smile. "I've got it, Claudia. You've cooked your whole life. It's time to rest." It sounded caring, but the tone was erasing me. Dylan was different. He lay on the sofa all day, scrolling his phone, sometimes heading out without saying where. When I asked about work, he just said, "Don't worry, I'm waiting on a few calls." But I knew it had been more than 8 months since he left the construction company. I didn't want to keep score, but after 3 weeks my bank balance was dropping fast. Grocery bills doubled and Harper borrowed my card to place online orders. I realized I was paying for things that weren't mine. One evening, standing in my bedroom, I looked out the window. A warm glow from the master bedroom fell across the lawn, and I heard the soft laughter of 2 young people making calculations. I opened my cabinet and took out a small wooden box. Inside were the deed, Evan's will, and old savings books. Everything was still there. I closed the lid, placed my hand on top, and breathed in. In that moment I knew, if I stayed silent, they would take everything. Not just the house, but my self-respect and the rest of my life. The next morning I went to the electronics store near Walmart and bought 2 mini cameras, thumb-sized, Wi-Fi, viewable on my phone. The clerk kindly showed me how to use them, assuming I wanted to protect against burglars. He didn't know the burglars were already inside. That night, I installed one behind a Mexican ceramic vase in the living room, angled toward the kitchen. I opened my phone and saw a crisp image, catching even the smallest movement. I felt something strange, pain and clarity at once. I told myself, watch first, talk later. I was no longer the shaky woman after Evan died. I'd rebuilt a life once. I could do it again this time to protect what I made with my own 2 hands. Outside, evening settled. Light touched the window frame, washing the wedding photo I had rehung in amber. Evan was still smiling. I whispered, "It's okay, love. I'll keep this house safe." And as the night closed in, the tiny camera began to record. The real story had only just begun. The first camera I placed behind the Mexican vase on the cabinet, right at the living room corner. From there, the thumb-size lens could see almost the entire room, even the kitchen where Harper moved in and out like it was her private domain. I kept the second camera in a drawer, waiting for the right spot. I wasn't in a hurry. I knew this game needed time. On day 1 after installing it, I sat on my bed and opened the app. The screen showed Harper with a tape measure, checking the curtains. She said casually, "These curtains are outdated. We should switch to automatic ones with a remote. It'll look more upscale." Dylan stood beside her, jotting notes in a small notebook, nodding like a tech assistant. "Yeah, the house will definitely look brighter." he said, oblivious to whose house it was. I sat there watching, a chill running down my spine. Every small laugh from Harper, every touch of her hand on the walls and frames, felt like they were peeling the warmth off. This place, layer by layer. From that day, Harper started what she called a kitchen restructuring. I called it something else, erasing me. She moved my things to the highest shelves, places I couldn't reach, even on tiptoe. She called the soft green ceramic bowls Evan bought at a local market outdated in their place, cold, plain white plates. Whenever I walked in to cook, Harper appeared right away, voice sweet but directive. "I'll do it, Claudia. You should rest. You've cooked your whole life. Now I'll take care of you." It sounded polite, but her eyes scanned knives and fridge shelves like an inventory. One morning, I set out to make my usual banana bread. I opened the cabinet and froze flour, eggs, milk, all gone. In their place were cold-pressed juices, imported cheeses, almond milk, and pricey granola. I asked, "Harper, where did you put my things?" She shrugged, smiling lightly. I tidied up. "Old stuff isn't great for your health, Claudia." For the first time ever, I felt like a guest in my own kitchen. The weekly grocery emails kept climbing, from $80 to $100 to $270. I knew I wasn't the one spending like that. But when I asked, Dylan would say, "Don't worry. Harper knows how to balance a budget." One evening I opened the fridge. Amid the fancy cheeses and detox juices sat a bag of bread I'd bought the week before covered in green mold. I picked it up, stared at the fuzz on the crust, and felt my throat tighten. I set it down and sat at the table where Evan used to read the paper each morning and cried quietly, not from hunger, but from being cut out of the picture of my own life. About a week later, I checked the camera again. The feed was clear, Harper on the sofa, phone to her ear. Her voice came through the tiny speaker. "I'm serious. This area's values are rising fast. If we list at the right time, we can get over 300,000. My mother-in-law won't live forever. This house will be ours sooner or later." I saw Dylan walk by and ask, "Lo, what if Mom finds out?" Harper chuckled. "Let me handle it. We just need her to sign a few information updates." I felt my heart pound, not from fear, but awakening. I hit save, time-stamped the clip, and moved it to a special folder. On my table, the note Maeve had me stick up was still there. Record everything. Don't trust promises, trust proof. I numbered each file and wrote a caption. Harper, talking about listing the house June 12th. For the first time in days, I felt strangely calm. That night, sitting by the Tiffany lamp, I thought of Evan. He used to say, "A home holds your spirit, Claudie. Keep it clean, not just with polish, but with self-respect." I looked at the brown leather armchair where he always read the paper, the armrest darkened by 40 years of his hand. I laid my palm there, the leather cool, the memory warm. I knew if Evan were here, he wouldn't let anyone touch this house with that attitude. But I also knew he'd want me to fight wisely, not with rage, but with reason. The next day, I reopened the materials from an elder rights and homeownership community class I'd taken last year. Among the instructors was Talia Chen, a young attorney who spoke clearly and had a smile that made you trust her. I found her card again. The number was still in my wallet. That afternoon I called, "Talia, this is Claudia Hart. We met in the elder rights class. I think I need your advice." Her voice was steady and warm. "Yes, Miss Hart. Could you come to my office tomorrow morning? I'll review your house documents." The next morning I drove Evan's old gray Subaru, nearly 20 years old, downtown to Talia's office. She greeted me with a warm smile and a cup of tea. "Did you bring the house papers?" she asked. I opened my bag and pulled out an old folder. Deed, purchase, contract, insurance receipts, Evan's will. Talia read each page, sometimes jotting notes. When she finished, she looked up and said firmly, "You are the sole legal owner. No one can remove you from this home without your consent, and right now, you haven't signed any power of attorney or transfer documents. That means you retain full control." I nodded, feeling a little lighter, but Talia wasn't done. She added, "However, you need to secure your documents right away. I recommend you photograph everything and give a copy to someone you trust. Also, change your email and bank passwords and check whether anyone has been added as a beneficiary." I wrote down every line. Talia looked at me and asked quietly, "Are they living with you now?" "Yes," I said. "My son and his wife." Her eyes dimmed slightly. "Then I want you to gather more proof of intent to take over texts, calls, recordings. If they stay and show possession or coercion, you can request a lawful eviction order." I asked, "What if they refuse to leave?" Talia said, "You're not alone, Miss Hart. The law protects you, but we need evidence." Driving home, I turned on the radio. "Blue Moon of Kentucky" came on Evan's song whenever he fixed the fence. I smiled. Talia's words lingered, "You're not alone." That afternoon, I got home and found Harper taping color samples to the wall. Dylan was browsing real estate sites. Harper turned, smiling. "I'm drafting a plan to redo the living room, Claudia. I want to make this an open space like the model homes in Charlotte." I smiled, hiding my real expression behind my cup of tea. Sounds ambitious. That night, I went to my room and shut the door. On my phone, Harper was still on-screen, tape measure in hand, lips moving, the mic too far to catch it all. I tapped record. From that moment, I understood. I had officially entered the fight to take back my home. Light from the Tiffany lamp reflected across the wall, laying a soft gold on my face. I touched Evan's photo frame and murmured, "Love, I'm keeping my promise. They haven't won." And in the quiet, the house seemed to listen. Only the tiny camera blinked steady, small like the first spark of justice. I didn't need many days to see Harper wasn't just updating the house. She was setting up a deal. That morning, I'd just made chamomile tea when the front door opened. Harper came in with a polished smile. "Claudia, I have a friend dropping by to take a look at a few details just for reference." I glanced at her spotless heels. This wasn't a casual visit. A moment later, the doorbell rang. A young man with gelled hair, crisp white shirt, leather briefcase stepped in. Harper beamed. "This is Colin, a real estate agent, an old classmate. He knows this area well and wants to help estimate the value of Mom's house." My heart went cold. "Mom's house, not my house." She said estimate like a breeze, but I knew when an agent walks in, they've already considered a sale. I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching through the crack. Harper poured coffee using the commemorative porcelain set Evan gave me for my 40th birthday, a set I never let anyone touch. She set the tray down, turning her back to the camera hidden behind the vase. Colin sat and opened his tablet, voice upbeat. "This place has great potential. With this square footage, if you update the interiors, change the floors, repaint, you're looking at $310,000 to $330,000, depending on timing." Harper tilted her head, sugar sweet. "What if we change the door frames and add automatic shades?" Colin nodded. "Tack on a few thousand and you're set. South Asheville's hot right now, so this is a golden time to list." I heard pen scratching paper. Dylan, seated beside him, asked in a tone so casual it chilled me, "Hey, let's say, the house is still in my mom's name after we renovate. Can we switch ownership after the sale?" Colin hesitated. "Legally, you need the owner's signature. But if the family agrees, the process is quick." Harper cut in. "Oh, she agrees to everything, she just gets mixed up with paperwork. She's not into managing this stuff anymore." They laughed, and a spoon clinked against porcelain metal on china, like a needle pricking my heart. I didn't step out. I sat in my bedroom, watching the live feed, Harper playing dutiful daughter-in-law before the agent, and Dylan, the boy I carried while Evan traveled for work, now nodding like an accomplice. My hands shook so much I set the cup down. But I didn't cry. Tears would only make them stronger. I needed clarity. After nearly an hour, Colin stood, shook Harper's hand, and said, "I'll prep a detailed valuation. With some decluttering and photos, you could list in 2 weeks. Congratulations, you've got a valuable asset." Harper beamed, as if she'd just closed a great deal. The door shut, leaving the smell of coffee mixed with the vanilla room spray Harper liked thick and artificial. I quietly turned off my phone and sat still until my heart settled. From the living room, Harper's voice rose clear and cold. "I'll call the lender about the deposit for the South Asheville place. Good schools. Quiet. Perfect for a family." Dylan mumbled. "What about Mom?" Harper answered, lower but still audible on the mic. "Senior living. I found a place with great reviews, private rooms, quiet. On paper, it looks perfect. She'll adjust." I let out a dry, strangled laugh. Senior living. That's what they called their plan to push me out, dressed up in pretty words. I took out my phone and exported the video. 3 clips. Harper entertaining the agent, Dylan asking about switching ownership later, and the line about senior living. I sent everything to Talia, with a short note. "Here's proof of intent to take over. They're moving on the first steps." In under 10 minutes, Talia replied, 24-karat evidence. Keep the originals untouched. I'll guide next steps. And Claudia, you're doing everything right. Just 4 lines, but it felt like someone had breathed life back into me. In this fight, I wasn't alone. When night fell, I walked into the living room. Harper and Dylan had gone out to dinner. The house was unusually quiet, only the wall clock ticking. I moved slowly through the room, touching the old things, the Tiffany lamp still casting warm gold, the leather armchair still dented where Evan used to sit. I lifted our wedding photo, the one Harper had removed, and hung it back where it belonged. Evan was still smiling in it, pride in his eyes. I whispered, "Love, I'm keeping my promise. I won't let them turn this home into a cheap commodity." Then, I took a small notebook and wrote, in steady strokes, June 14th. They brought an agent to appraise the house. They discussed selling and a new place in South Asheville. I sat 2 walls away and heard every word. They decided I was invisible. And because of that, I'll make sure they see me in a way they won't expect. I closed the notebook and set it on the coffee table. Outside, a thin moon rose, washing a pale glow over the living room wall. I turned off all the lights except the Tiffany lamp, the lamp that was Evan's, and now stands guard over my honor. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with a cup of tea gone cold, thinking about everything. About Evan, about the son I once believed was a good man, about the daughter-in-law planning each move. I didn't feel hatred, just a raw emptiness like someone had scooped out my softest part and packed it with ice. I opened the notebook and added one last line. June 14th, I set a 7-day deadline, 7 days to prepare a counterplan. I didn't. I know exactly how everything would play out, but I knew I wouldn't sit still. I would collect, record, and protect every inch of this house of what is mine. Early morning, the first sunlight streamed into the living room. I sat by the window frame, watching tiny dust motes sparkle in the light like millions of floating memories. Outside, Harper's car sounded. I heard her voice carrying on the phone. "Yeah, Colin. Please email the valuation. We want to list next week if my mother-in-law signs quickly." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In my head, Talia's voice was clear. Don't confront them head-on before it's time. Let them expose themselves. I smiled, smoothed my hair, and stood up. On the table, my wedding photo with Evan caught the sun, shimmering like a reminder. There are things people can buy but never truly own, and this house is one of them. That morning, I woke earlier than usual. Asheville air was a little crisp, dew still clinging to the rose, canes on the porch. I looked at myself in the mirror. The face with wrinkles no longer made me sad. I chose a beige dress in the soft fabric Evan liked and put on the pearl earrings he gave me for our 25th anniversary. In the mirror, the light reflected a woman I had once forgotten, not the gentle old lady they imagined, but Claudia Hart, who worked 30 years and paid for this house down to the last dollar. I brewed coffee, the whole bean kind Evan loved, kept in a glass jar. When the aroma filled the kitchen, I knew I was ready. Around 8:30, Dylan and Harper woke up. They had argued in low voices in their room, then came out looking tired. I sat at the table, hands around my coffee cup, voice even, "We need to talk." Dylan frowned slightly, and before he could react, I continued, firmer than even I expected. "I bought this house. I decide who lives here and for how long. Any changes in this house require my consent." As the words landed, the room seemed to pause. Dylan blinked, staring at me like he was trying to recognize whether the woman in front of him was really his mother. "Mom, why are you saying this out of nowhere?" I thought. "You thought I would keep staying silent?" I cut in, eyes on him. "No, Dylan, my silence hasn't meant consent." Harper stepped out, phone in hand, lips tilted in a half-smirk, half-challenge. "Claudia, you must be misremembering. This house was bought with Dad's life insurance, and Dylan should have a share of that. I'm only helping you modernize it." I set my cup down, voice low but precise. "No, Harper. I'm not misremembering. I signed the contract, my name is on the deed, and I've paid every property tax for 6 years. This is my legal asset." I picked up the remote and turned on the TV. The camera clip came up, Colin the real estate agent, voice clear. "The price could reach $310,000 to $330,000 if you list at the right time." I tapped again. Harper's voice came through, sharp. "I'll handle the paperwork. My mother-in-law won't live forever." Senior living sounds good anyway. Senior living echoed through the room like a knife. Dylan whipped toward Harper, face flushing. You said that?" Harper froze, her voice catching. "I was joking." I turned off the TV and faced them. "No need to argue," I said evenly. "I don't need excuses. I only want you to understand one thing. I know everything." Dylan forced a smile. "Mom, you recorded us? Why would you do that?" I answered plainly. "No. I protected my home." I stood and pulled a paper from the envelope I'd placed on the table, the printout from my attorney, Talia Chen. "I've retained an attorney," I said. "If, 7 days from today, you have not moved out, she will file for eviction and a no trespass order with the court." Harper's eyes widened, her voice harsh. "You can't do really that. We're family." I nodded. "Yes, but family doesn't mean permission to violate boundaries. Family means respect, not exploitation." Dylan lowered his head. I could see him wrestling with embarrassment and anger. "Mom, I just wanted to ease your burden. This house needs maintenance, someone to take care of it. I didn't mean I cut in. You let someone else decide everything in my kitchen without me. That's not helping, Dylan, that's taking over." Harper shifted tactics fast. She inhaled, softened her tone, eyes glossing like she might cry. "I only want you to have a better life. I'm afraid you're lonely. Things here are old, updating them would make you happier. I meant no harm." I looked at her for a long moment. I had been a woman who knew how to cry to diffuse conflict. I recognized purposeful tears. "Harper," I said slowly, "if you truly wanted to help, you would ask before acting. You would respect what belongs to someone else. If you only want to replace, that isn't help, that's erasure." Harper lowered her gaze, silent. Dylan sat down, fingers laced, lips tight. I exhaled light but steady. From now on, There are 3 rules in this house. 1. Respect. No one changes anything without my approval. 2. Ask. Every expense, every plan must be transparent. 3. Share costs. I am not a bank and not a sponsor. If you can't meet these 3, then you leave. The room went still. I could hear the clock ticking, counting the seconds stretching between us. Dylan lifted his head, voice unsteady. "Mom, I know I was wrong. Don't be so tense. Can I give you a hug?" I stepped back. "No, Dylan. Gestures don't replace responsibility. You don't need to hug me, you need to understand me." He froze, hands suspended. His eyes glistened, then dropped. I felt no triumph, only a bone-deep sadness, a quiet space between 2 generations. I turned to Harper, gentler but firm. "I'm giving you 7 days. I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you time to choose, comply or leave." Harper looked away, lips pressed tight. Dylan started to speak, then didn't. I cleared my cup and carried it to the sink. Under the sound of running water, I felt a settled calm. In the 6 years since Evan died, this was the first time I truly felt in control of my life. At noon, I sat on the porch and texted Maeve. I told them, 7 days. If anything happens, can you stand as my witness? She replied immediately, "Of course." "And Claudia? You came back today, not the quiet one anymore." I set the phone down and looked at the roses. Sunlight hit the red petals, gleaming like jewels. I thought maybe Evan was watching me from somewhere, smiling. In the afternoon, Harper moved through the kitchen, cleaning in silence. Dylan went to the yard to make a call, voice low. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I had a plan, evidence, an attorney, a friend beside me, and, more than anything, put myself back. Night fell, the house quiet. I sat before the wedding photo, the Tiffany lamp warming Evan's face. I whispered, "Do you see, love?" I finally stood up. I spoke again in my own voice. I smiled slightly, sure of one thing more than ever. I'm no longer the compliant Claudia they knew. I am the mother, the woman no one can erase from this house. That night, wind pushed hard along the porch, the damp smell of earth slipping through the doorframe after rain. I was about to turn off the light when I heard a spoon hit a porcelain cup in the living room. A small sound, but in a silent house it felt like the opening cue for another battle. I stopped, kept the lights off. Through the crack of my door, pale yellow spilled from the living room where Harper and Dylan sat facing each other. I quietly opened the camera app on my phone and switched to record. Every word came through as if the walls themselves were carrying it to me. "You're too weak, Dylan," Harper hissed. "I told you if you don't act decisively, your mother will never leave. She's playing the victim to gain sympathy." Dylan answered, tired. "You're pushing this too far. I just wanted to stay for a while. You turned it into a whole plan to take the house. Do you know Mom already found a lawyer?" Harper lowered her voice, but the mic still caught it. "You think I don't know? It's just a scare tactic. An old woman in her 60s, hands shaking when she signs. What can she do?" I clenched my phone, heart pounding, but I still didn't step out. Not out of fear, but because I needed them to say it all, so this house, its walls, would remember everything. Next morning, when they went out, I installed the second camera in the hallway above the landscape painting. From there, it could see my bedroom door, the stairs, and the kitchen. Every movement saved to the cloud, second by second. That afternoon, I replayed the footage. What I saw tightened my throat. Harper and Dylan were in the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes. They folded my coats, the knit scarves I made, even Evan's porcelain set. Each item went into boxes labeled donation. Harper said breezily, "Just pack first. She never uses this stuff anyway." Dylan stayed quiet, head down as he closed the lids. Watching that on my screen, I felt something in me fracture. Not because they took things, but because they acted as if I had already disappeared. The next day at noon, Harper sat on the porch making a call. I sat in the kitchen, quietly listening through the camera. "Hi, Miss Ruth," Harper said sweetly. "Remember me? I mentioned my mother-in-law the other day. I think you should come talk to her. She seems confused, not very coherent." I knew immediately she meant Ruth Navarro. A mediator Harper had mentioned someone who handles families with elders needing guardianship. Harper added, voice dropping, "If possible, could you also bring up a power of attorney so we can help manage her finances? Tomorrow afternoon?" I set down my teacup, my chest sinking. So after failing with the agent, they chose to attack my capacity. The following afternoon, Ruth arrived, a woman around 50, neat curls, half-rimmed glasses, carrying a large leather bag. Harper welcomed her warmly, as if hosting a consultation in her own home. I poured coffee, set it gently on the table. "Please," I said, calm. Ruth smiled, but her eyes scanned the house like an appraisal. "Thank you. I just want to chat a little. Your son and his wife said you've had trouble managing your assets lately, is that right?" I glanced at Harper, who lowered her head in a worried pose. Dylan sat silent. I took a sip and said, "No. I'm lucid enough to know who was in my home and who tried to change the locks without asking." Ruth paused, then kept her smile. "I understand. Sometimes a financial power of attorney can reduce stress. At this age, paperwork mistakes can cause issues." I opened my bag and pulled the envelope I'd prepared. Inside was a letter from my family doctor, Dr. Simmons, who examined me last week. "This is my capacity statement," I said, sliding it to Ruth. "My doctor confirms I'm fully competent, memory intact, with no signs of cognitive decline." Ruth read a few lines, then nodded slowly. "I see." Her initial confidence faded. Harper jumped in, trying to recover. "Miss Ruth, I only meant she should have support, not that we doubt her," Dylan added. "We just want to protect Mom." I looked at them both, voice quiet but firm. "If you want to protect, start by not lying." No one spoke. Ruth's eyes shifted. She stood and said neutrally, "I understand. Perhaps this isn't the right time. Keep my card in case you want to talk further." I smiled and accepted the card like a piece of evidence. "Thank you, Ruth. I'll keep it safe." She left in silence. Harper looked at me, trying to appear composed, but her hand trembled around the cup. Dylan avoided my eyes and muttered, "Mom, you misunderstood." I didn't answer. I just tapped stop recording in my pocket, every word of the conversation saved. That night I sent the audio file to Talia with a note. They brought in a mediator, mentioned financial power of attorney. "I have evidence." "In under 10 minutes, Talia replied. "Perfect, Claudia. You're doing exactly right. Keep the original files. Tomorrow I'll send the notice to terminate their stay. Be ready." I leaned back and closed my eyes. The house was quiet. I could hear light rain on the roof, steady as the heartbeat of the one who's gone, Evan, who always believed every home has a soul. Next morning, Maeve arrived in a jean jacket with a big tote. "What's next, Claudie?" she asked, eyes tender and encouraging. I opened the cabinet and pointed to the boxes labeled donation. "Relabel everything. I won't let even one of Evan's scarves be stamped as charity." Have you ever seen someone try to redefine an elder's capacity? In this part, what angered you most, the donation boxes or the POA suggestion? Tell me in the comments, so this story can become a shared voice. We worked all morning. Maeve replaced labels. I made an inventory. The important things, deed, insurance papers, savings. I put into the auxiliary safe in my bedroom. Maeve kept the spare key. We locked it and carried the file bag to her house 3 blocks away. "Safer with me," she said. Talia said the same. "And Claudie, don't forget to change every password." I nodded. That evening I changed every bank, email, and the smart lock on the front door. Each time the keypad lit, it felt like I was closing another door they'd opened without permission. Late at night, I printed the termination notice under North Carolina law from Talia's email. I read every line carefully, then added a handwritten closing: "The violators must vacate within 7 days from the date signed. If not, the owner reserves the right to request law enforcement intervention." I signed at the bottom, my handwriting shaky but clear. Then I taped the notice discreetly in the kitchen, just under the cabinet right where Harper opened every morning for her juice glass. I stepped back, watched the white paper glow under the warm light, and felt like I'd hung a protective charm. Outside, wind nudged the curtains. The house was silent, but I knew its walls had heard everything, heard their plans, heard my words, and now stood with me. I turned off the light and whispered, "Listen, Evan, hear me. I finally learned how to protect myself." In the dark, the porch wind sounded like an answer, warm and steady. On the 3rd morning after I posted the notice in the kitchen, the house was strangely quiet. No yoga music from Harper, fewer footsteps from Dylan. I thought they were preparing to leave quietly until Harper walked into the kitchen, resting a hand lightly on her stomach, her face a mix of stress and calculation. "Claudia," she called, softer and slower than usual. I need to talk to you." I was wiping the table and looked up. Morning light crossed her face pale, trying to appear fragile. "I'm pregnant," Harper said, eyes down, voice barely above a breath. I paused half a beat. The words dropped into the kitchen like a pebble into a deep well, quiet but seismic. I set the cloth down and drew a long breath. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded, fingers laced over her belly like cradling a life already here. "Just 6 weeks. We haven't told anyone. I don't want to make things worse. I just hope you understand we can't move out now." Harper lifted her head. Her voice shook, but her eyes brightened like someone who'd found a winning card. "For the baby, Mom. You were a mother, you understand. I just need a stable place, at least until I give birth. After that, we'll go." I went quiet. In my mind flashed the young Evan when I was pregnant with Dylan, how he prepared everything, from the little crib to the body pillow. I know the fear and tenderness of a mother-to-be, but I also remembered Talia's words very clearly from our consult last week. "Pregnancy doesn't create residency rights or property ownership, Claudia. Don't let feelings derail judgment. Good hearts can be exploited through their kindest instincts." I poured water, my hand still faintly shaking. "Harper," I said softly, "I bless the baby, but that doesn't change the boundary. This is my home, and I was clear about the 7-day deadline. I won't take it back." Harper stared at me for a few seconds, then her look shifted to wounded anger. "You're heartless," she snapped. "You're throwing your pregnant daughter-in-law out on the street?" "What kind of mother-in-law does that?" I breathed in. "I'm not throwing anyone out. I'm asking you to leave a place you tried to take. There's a difference, Harper." Dylan came down the stairs, face confused. "Harper, come on," he said quietly. "Don't do this." "Be quiet," she shot back. "Don't you see she has no heart? She only cares about the house, not blood." Dylan stayed silent, avoiding my eyes. I knew my son was stuck in the middle, but this time I didn't try to rescue the moment. I looked straight at Harper. "Don't use the baby as a shield to justify crossing boundaries, Harper. A good mother starts with honesty, not manipulation." The air turned heavy. Harper opened her mouth to speak, then didn't. I turned, opened the drawer, and pulled out the paper I had prepared. "This is the final notice," I said, setting it on the table. 7 days starting today. I wrote it by hand and signed it clearly. When the deadline comes, I'll proceed under the law. Harper looked at the paper like, It was a sentence. Dylan lowered his head, lips pressed tight. I folded the dishcloth, hung it back on the hook, and left the kitchen without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick in the dark. Outside, wind hissed softly through the trees. I thought of Evan, his voice in hard times, always low and steady. Keep the house, keep your honor. Don't let anyone decide for you what home is. I turned to the side and touched the wedding photo on the nightstand. Evan, I whispered, I'm doing what you would do, right? Tears fell onto the pillow, and I didn't wipe them away. Some tears don't belong to weakness, they belong to someone reclaiming ownership. Before sunrise, I got up. Pale blue light seeped through the curtains like thin mist. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and plugged in the external drive. Every video file, audio clip, journal entry, and photo of the notice in the kitchen, I gathered them into one folder and named it Proof 7 Days. I sent that package to Talia with a message. This is all the evidence I have. I want everything clear before the deadline. 10 minutes later, she replied, Very good, Claudia. I have everything. You're on the right track. Stay calm, I'll monitor the legal side. Reading that line eased me. In the chaos of betrayal, at least one person believed me and we had a clear plan. Near noon, Maeve stopped by with 2 smoothies and a soft smile. Walk? She asked. It's a beautiful day. We went along the little neighborhood road. Maple leaves drifted down, cool air brushing like a soothing hand. I told her briefly that Harper was pregnant, my voice dropping. Maeve listened, then laid a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said. Pregnancy isn't a free pass. If you cave now, you'll lose everything later. Hey, try the 4-7-8 breathing. Talia taught me during that. Mess with my brother. Inhale 4, hold 7, exhale 8. Keep doing it settles the nerves. I followed. Inhale 4 beats, hold 7, exhale 8. Wind slipped through my hair, and someone's rose garden sent a faint scent. My chest loosened, like a knot finally untied. That afternoon the kitchen was quiet. Harper and Dylan had gone out. I stood in the familiar room, light falling across the old wooden counter. On the shelf sat Evan's tea set, the one Harper used to serve the agent, without asking me. I took a soft cloth and wiped each piece, carefully, like touching a memory. Every tiny scratch in the porcelain was a slice of time mornings at the window, him with the paper, me with the kettle. I put the set back exactly where it used to be, a small ritual of taking ownership back. My hands were steady now. I knew exactly what I was doing. I wasn't fighting to push someone out. I was protecting the place that once held the heart of a marriage, of youth, of memory. That evening I wrote in my journal, June 17th, Harper says she's pregnant. I believe it, but I won't let it blind me. I am not against a child, I am against deceit. Evan, you taught me that kindness without boundaries becomes a trap. I understand that now. I closed the book and listened to the wind threading through the eaves. Somewhere in the house, the walls stayed silent, but I felt them watching, witnessing each step as I reclaimed my place. Outside, a light rain began. I turned off the lamp and stood at the window. In the dark, I spoke quietly, not for anyone else but for myself. Keep the house. Keep your honor. Keep your calm. Then I left the kitchen, the scent of coffee and the ticking clock behind me, the familiar breath of a home waking from a long sleep of silence. Friday evening, the last sunlight pooled on the porch like slow honey. The wall clock struck 6, 1 beat at a time. I stood in the living room and heard a car stop at the curb. Talia texted, I'm here, waiting in the car. Officer Jackson is with me, per schedule, just in case. I looked through the window, a silver SUV at the curb. Talia stepped out in a white shirt and gray vest, composed. Next to her stood a uniformed officer with a notebook. They wouldn't come in unless needed. I gave a slight nod through the glass, letting them know I was fine. Inside, the hard scrape of a suitcase dragged across the floor. Harper was closing the last box. Her perfume mixed with cardboard dust, thickening the air. Dylan stood by the stairs, hands in his pockets, eyes down. "We're not done," Harper said without looking up. "Can you give us a few more hours?" "I already gave 2 weeks," I answered even. "It's 6 o'clock the deadline," I stated in writing. "I'm not throwing you out. I'm following the law." She flipped her hair and curled a thin smile. "Law, law, always the law. In the end, what do you have besides this house?" I looked straight at her, not angry, just calm. "I have the truth and legal records." "You have words." Dylan stepped closer, voice small but edged. "Mom, I don't want drama, but if you're this rigid, I'll tell Dad's side of the family. Everyone will hear how you treated your son and daughter-in-law." I exhaled not from fear, but from sadness that he still believed truth could be drowned out by noise. "Tell whoever you want," I said slowly. "But I have evidence, video, audio, and my attorney's statement. I don't need threats. I have facts." Silence fell. The clock ticked again, counting the last seconds of their hold on my home. Harper gripped the suitcase handle, eyes cold. "I hope this empty house makes you happy," she said sweetly enough to sting. "It isn't empty," I said softly. "It's clean." She turned and rolled the suitcase out the door. Dylan followed, stopped for a second, and looked back at me. His eyes swirled with regret and pride. I couldn't read it, so I said one last thing. "Dylan, I hope you find your self-respect before you try to find your mother again." The door clicked shut. That small clack was the first sound of freedom. The house was so quiet I could hear wind nudging the window frames. I stood in the living room as the last light spread gold across the floor like a fresh cover. No footsteps, no synthetic essential oils smothering Evan's coffee, no appraising eyes, only relief. I sat on the sofa, felt the cushion give. Beside me lay the embroidered floral pillow I thought Harper had thrown out. I smoothed the fabric and whispered, "This house is mine again." My voice was small, but in that quiet space, it felt like a declaration. Half an hour later, a knock. Maeve walked in with a paper bag and a bright grin. "Mission accomplished?" I laughed. "Completely. They left at 6 o'clock sharp. Then it's time to celebrate." She lifted the bag. "Butter-filled, waffles, and fresh ground coffee. I'm brewing." We nudged the table back, opened the windows to let the last of the evening light in. Air flowed free. Dust shimmered like golden threads. Maeve laid out the food. "I remember the first time I came here. Your house smelled like almond and linen. Lately it was nothing but sharp peppermint oil." I chuckled and poured coffee. "We're back now." Almond, coffee, and silence. She nodded. "Silence is a luxury too, Claudie." I opened the front door wide. The whole block glowed in sunset. Sparrows hopped along the fence. Neighbors laughed in their yards, and a far-off radio carried the evening news. Life slipped back into its rhythm, no longer occupied, no longer disturbed. Inside me, there was an odd, pleasant emptiness, not sadness, space to breathe. I texted Talia. "They're gone. No incident. Thank you for everything." She replied almost instantly. "I'm happy for you, Claudia. Watch the next few weeks. They might come back to demand items or stir trouble. If anything happens, call me or the police." I sent a thumbs up and set the phone down. That night, I put the house back in order. I started with the kitchen where it all began. I removed the spice jars Harper bought, dumped the spoiled turmeric, and reset the shelves my way. I grabbed a fresh set of sheets and changed the living room sofa. As the clean fabric slid into place, it felt like wiping away weeks of strain. The washer hummed, water flowed like a soothing soundtrack. On the shelf, I put on Jazz Dave Brubeck's Take 5, Evan's favorite. The warm saxophone notes drifted through the rooms like a greeting from the past. I smiled. Harper was right about one thing. The house was empty, but empty clean, empty for real life to come back, not the pretend kind. Around 8, Maeve headed home. Before leaving, she hugged me light but warm. "I'm proud of you, Claudie. Not because you beat them, but because I came back to yourself." I smiled. "Me too. For the first time in years, I feel at peace inside my own walls." The door closed. I dimmed the lights, leaving only the Tiffany lamp's soft gold. The house rested, bathed in music. I sat at the dining table, pulled out a blank page, and wrote the first lines of my boundary list. 1. No one enters my home without my consent. 2. No one speaks for me, signs for me, or protects me by stripping my rights. 3. Kindness can be a gift, but kindness needs a fence. 4. Everything in this house holds a memory. If you touch it with respect. 5. If one day I grow weak, remember, I still have a voice and I will use it. I read it over and felt calm. This paper wasn't for Harper or Dylan. It was for my future self in case I ever forgot that I have the right to say no. I stuck it on the fridge between 2 photos, one of Evan and me at our 30th anniversary, and one Maeve took of us laughing on the porch. The light caught the ink, making the words glow. I sat on the sofa, closed my eyes, and listened to the wind in the curtains. There was no fear left in this house, only warmth, coffee, and the jazz fading down. I spoke softly, like closing a long chapter. "Welcome home, Claudia." And in that moment, I knew. Sometimes the biggest win isn't keeping a roof, it's finding yourself inside it. I thought after that Friday afternoon, everything would be quiet. I was wrong. The second storm didn't come through the front door, it came through familiar phones. Monday morning, while I was watering roses on the porch, the phone rang. The screen read, "Aunt Nora." Evan's cousin, who cried in my arms at the funeral, who once said, "You're the best part of Evan that remains." "Claudia, what is going on?" Her voice was rough, irritated. "Dylan called me last night. Harper's pregnant and you kicked them out? How could you?" I took a breath, kept steady. "Aunt Nora, it's not that. Simple. No need to explain." She cut in. "A good mother knows how to sacrifice. You live alone in a big house, why not show some mercy?" I gripped the phone. Morning sun still lit the dew on the roses, but inside my sky dropped another floor. "Aunt," I said softly, "sacrifice only means something when it isn't being exploited." On the other end, silence. Then the line went dead. Soon after, the phone rang again. Cousin Jeff. He once stayed in my house 2 months after his divorce. Now his tone was half scolding, half sighing. "Hey, I heard from Dylan you're tense. Maybe give them another chance. Harper's about to be a mom." "Jeff," I asked, "have you listened to me at all? Or only to him?" He hesitated, then offered one line. "You're old, don't end up alone. Forgive." I hung up and set the phone on the table. For a moment, I heard my own blood in my ears. Not anger, hurt. People who once ate at my table and heard my stories. All about Evan now turned away after one call from Dylan. By noon, another call. Evan's old friend, Clarence. "Claudia, I heard you lost your temper and want to take your own son to court. Is that true?" "I'm not suing. I'm protecting my property. But that house is where Evan lived. Aren't you afraid people will say you forgot what you owe him?" I let out a small, dry laugh. "If Evan heard that, he'd crack up, Clarence. He taught me to keep what we built, not hand it to someone who disrespects it." Silence for a few seconds, then he hung up. I sat and watched the screen light and dim. Each call was an accusation carried like an arrow, sent by people I once trusted. That afternoon, Maeve found me sitting on the porch, phone face down. More calls, she asked, handing me iced tea. Yeah, everyone has an opinion about a good mother. They forget to ask whether any good child makes his mother change the locks. Maeve sat, studied me, and said, softly, Claudie, stop picking up. The ones who get you don't need your defense. The ones who don't, you could talk a lifetime and it won't matter. I nodded. She was right. That night, I silenced the phone. For the first time in years, I allowed myself not to hear everything. But not everyone called to accuse me. Near midnight, a text from Dylan lit the screen. I hesitated, then opened it. When you're truly old, don't come to me. I read it again and again, my heart stinging but no longer collapsing. I typed back, I don't need your care. I need respect, the very thing you didn't give. I hit send and took a long breath. Next morning, as I was making coffee, a video call came in. The name read, Piper Hart, my brother's daughter, Marcus Jr.'s girl. Auntie. Her voice was clear but trembling a little. They're trashing you on Facebook, saying you're cold to Dylan. But I don't believe it. I know you're not like that. I smiled, eyes wet. Thank you, Piper. Do you have proof? She asked quietly, leaning toward the camera. I nodded. I do. I kept everything. Here. I shared a short clip. Harper talking about senior living and listing the house. Piper went quiet, then said firmly, I'll tell Dad. Don't worry, you're not alone. The call ended, but my heart brightened a shade. In all that noise, someone still believed in the light of truth. That afternoon, Marcus, my brother, called. His voice was low and measured. You holding up, Claudie? Mostly. You? I heard Dylan's side, but I know him. He's impulsive and his wife eggs him on. Your boy, you know how he is. I paused, then said, I do, but knowing doesn't mean accepting. Marcus sighed, long and airy, like wind in old trees through the phone. I'm proud of you. Stand firm. And Evan, if he were alive, I believe he'd stand beside you. This time, I cried for real, not from pain, but from being understood. After that call, I opened an old photo album on my computer. Pictures of Dylan as a kid, brown hair, clutching a chicken drumstick bigger than his wrist, smiling bright. I scrolled a 10th birthday, graduation, a shot of him hugging Evan after college. And then the latest, Dylan next to Harper, both staring at the laptop the day we talked about fixing the house. I looked at his face, the features were still my son's, but the eyes were different. Part of me wanted to blame Harper, but another part knew this betrayal had both their names on it. I closed the album, my heart lighter. Maybe for the first time, I wasn't trying to fix the memory, I was simply accepting it. That night, under warm lamplight, I set up an easel in the living room. I hadn't painted since Evan died. Tonight, I needed to do something just for me. I mixed colors and painted the horizon behind the Blue Ridge, the route Evan and I drove every fall. Layer by layer, blue settled over. Soft violet. When I finished, I signed the lower right corner, C.H. 2 simple letters, but I had never written them for myself before. Every past painting was signed Claudia and Evan. I studied the canvas a long while, calm. Maybe this is how I close a chapter, not by erasing it, but by painting a new one over the top. That night, I slept straight through with no dreams. No doors slamming, no strange footsteps, just steady breathing and a hint of lavender in the air. The next morning, I made coffee and stepped onto the porch. Gentle sunlight lay over the rose garden in bloom. The flowers bent under the night's dew, so fresh it was as if they'd never known a storm. I took a photo, posted it on Instagram, and wrote, "At last, what needed to leave has left. The roses still bloom." Within minutes, the morning walking group sent a flood of hearts with little comments. "So beautiful, Claudie. You're making me want to plant roses today." Your house looks bright again. I smiled, took a sip of coffee, and felt as warm as the first light of day. The storm passed, and I'm still here, whole, clear, and free. Tuesday afternoon, while I was sweeping leaves in the yard, a silver sedan eased to a stop at the gate. I recognized it right away, the familiar plate, the familiar soft thud of the car door. Dylan got out first, shirt wrinkled, face tired. Harper followed, her belly showing more now. In the back seat, I saw Aunt Nora, blue fedora tilted to one side, eyes sharp like a freshly honed blade. I stood still, broom in hand, wind tipping the rose canes behind me. Harper spoke first, her voice part apology, part rehearsal. "Claudia, I'm sorry. We were really wrong. I know you're angry, but we have nowhere to go. The temporary place we rented is dirty and cramped, and I'm pregnant." She set her hand on her belly, a slow, calculated move. Dylan stared at the ground, silent like a boy forced to apologize without knowing why. I nodded slightly but said nothing. Harper took one more step, eyes shimmering. "We're just asking to stay a few days, until we find another place. Really? We only need a few weeks." I set the broom down, took a long breath, then lifted my hand to my chest. "Harper," I said, "I understand there's a life here that needs protecting." I gestured lightly toward her belly. "But here," I set my hand over my heart, "there's someone else who needs protecting, and that person is me." Harper blinked, lips pressing together. Aunt Nora cleared her throat and stepped forward, voice tight and commanding, "Claudia, I know you're angry, but have you no humanity left? That's your own son, your blood." I turned to her, calm. "Aunt Nora, humanity doesn't mean letting people trample your boundaries. I learned that at too high a price." She rolled her eyes and jabbed, "You're old, don't be so bitter." I smiled. Age isn't a reason to lose boundaries. It's the reason to guard them even more. I invited them into the living room. The air was tight as a freshly cranked string. I set down a tea tray. A soft cinnamon rose scent lifted through the room. Dylan glanced around the house, looked the same, only neater, brighter. "Before you go on," I began, "I need to be clear. If you truly want to stay temporarily, I can only accept on non-negotiable conditions." Harper and Aunt Nora exchanged a look. Dylan frowned. I listed them slowly. 1. Respect no meddling, no changes, no touching my things. 2. Share household costs clearly. I don't support other adults. 3. A specific time frame, no open-ended stays. And last, if you truly want to stay, you sign a temporary lodging agreement with proper notarization. If any of these are missing, I refuse. Silence fell. Aunt Nora gave a short, scornful laugh. "Heavens! Do you think your home is a law firm? Papers and contracts with your own son?" "Claudia, bitterness is swallowing your heart." I answered evenly, "No. I'm letting reason protect my heart." Harper shifted tone quickly, softer, almost trembling. "I don't want to sign anything. I just want to rest. I'm exhausted. The doctor said I should avoid stress." She laid a hand on her belly and exhaled. "If you won't let us stay, then could you lend us money? We'll find another place. Just a small amount, please." I looked at her a long time. "All right. But I need a repayment plan, a clear due date, and signatures from both of you." Harper faltered and glanced at Dylan. He avoided my eyes. "Mom, we don't know exactly yet. Once things settle, we'll send it back." "So there is no plan," I concluded, quiet but cool. "Then my answer is no." Aunt Nora sprang up, louder. "Claudia, who have you become? If Evan were alive, he'd be heartbroken. You're turning your son away and shutting the door on family?" I met her gaze, steady. "If Evan were alive, Aunt, he would understand. He taught me that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you." The air thickened. Harper stood, voice shaky but frosty. "I get it. You win. I hope this spotless house makes you happy." It sounded like a rerun of last time, except this time it didn't hurt. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Afternoon light poured in, warm and straight. "I don't need to win, Harper. I need peace." "The door stays open, but not to lies." Dylan looked up, a flicker of shame passing through his eyes, then lowered his head and pulled the suitcase. Aunt Nora shot me one last glare, and they all left. The door closed. The sound of wheels on the road faded, and then was gone. I stood for a while. The room was still, holding only the scent of cinnamon rose tea and pale light on the wall. I sat at the table, opened my notebook, and wrote a few lines. June 22nd. Dylan came back with Harper and Aunt Nora. They said sorry, they wanted to stay, then borrow money. I refused warmly but firmly. "I'm not angry anymore, I just won't let them cross my boundaries again." I signed my name, then scanned the entire meeting record with timestamps. I filed it carefully in a folder labeled Home Legal. Caution not from fear, but from learning to keep proof for my self-respect. That night, Maeve called. "Done, Claudie?" "Done," I laughed. "That chapter's closed. Then let's see a movie tonight. I booked seats at the little theater on Main. Classic film, jazz score fits your mood." I chuckled and said yes. The tiny theater had maybe 20 seats, lights soft and low. The film was Roman Holiday. I sat in the middle, sipped soda, and listened to Audrey Hepburn laugh on screen. It felt strange, like youth had returned, but this time without the fear someone would snatch it away. When we left, night air lifted my hair, and vanilla drifted over from the bakery nearby. Maeve bought 2 crisp waffles and handed me one. "Remember this smell? Evan loved these." I nodded, smiling. He did. But now it doesn't feel sad anymore. We walked and laughed, our shadows long on the lit sidewalk. Back home, I opened the door and turned on the kitchen light. The air was warm, touched with new vanilla from the bag. I set it on the table and poured a glass of warm milk. I sat and wrote in my journal, evening of June 22nd. They returned with apologies that smelled like a script. I listened, didn't soften. I opened the door, didn't let hatred in, but didn't let deceit stay. Love is respecting boundaries, not breaking them in the name of family. I closed the book and looked around the house. Everything was intact, not just the things, but the peace. I turned off the light, let the vanilla scent drift through the air, and smiled. Freedom has its own fragrance. Tonight, it's sweet. Saturday morning, I was watering plants when the doorbell rang, 3 short, urgent chimes. Not the mail carrier, not Maeve's knock. I cracked the door, and my heart paused. A young woman stood there, hair in a bun, tired but kind face. In her arms, a baby boy wrapped in a soft beige blanket. The faint smell of milk, powder, and newborn skin slipped into the space between us. "Mrs. Claudia?" Her voice shook, small as a breath. "I'm Harper's cousin. She asked me to bring baby Rowan to see you." I looked at the baby. Fine brown hair like silk threads, round cheeks, tiny hand loosely curled. He gave a small sound so faint, and somehow it felt like I'd just heard my own heart melt. "How many weeks?" I asked, my voice rough. "Just over 3 weeks. Harper says he's healthy, but she's not ready to call you. She just wanted you to see him for a moment." She swayed the baby gently. A light breeze carried warm milk scent and the damp green of the yard. My heart tilted. I thought I'd locked every emotional door after so many. Hurts. But standing there, looking at a brand new, guiltless life, I understood compassion hadn't vanished. It was simply learning not to be used. I drew a breath. Talia's words sounded clear in my head, as if she stood beside me. "Claudia, don't let a newborn become a bargaining chip. Love for your grandchild is different from letting his parents keep crossing lines. I nodded slightly, then spoke slowly. Thank you for bringing him. Tell Harper and Dylan I bless Rowan. I hope he grows strong and is loved in the right way. The young woman blinked. Would you like to hold him for a moment? I looked at the child one last time. My whole body wanted to step forward, but I stopped. Not today, I said with a gentle smile. When things have healed, when the adults respect each other, I'll be the first to open the door. She nodded, eyes wet. I understand. I'll tell her. I brushed the edge of the blanket, not his skin, leaving only a trace of cord, of warmth at my fingertip. Welcome to the world, Rowan, I whispered. May you grow up to love without fearing boundaries. Then I closed the door softly. The stroller wheels rolled away over the stone path, folding into the hush of wind in the trees. I stood still a long time, until my heartbeat steadied. Once the door was shut, tears came slow and heavy. I cried not from regret, but to say goodbye to an illusion that love can last forever if we keep sacrificing without limits. I sat, wiped my face, and felt hollow but quietly lighter. A while later, Maeve arrived. Seeing me, she asked nothing, just opened her arms and held me tight. You didn't reject the baby, she said, warm and low. You rejected the pattern of abuse. Those are two different things. I rested my head on her shoulder and laughed through tears. You know, Maeve, for the first time in my life, saying no feels warm. She squeezed my hand and murmured, because it's a no, from someone who knows her worth. That afternoon, I opened the storage room and looked at the stack of boxes still labeled donation. The things Harper once marked to clear space for their future, now I chose to make it real. I loaded each box into Maeve's car. Inside were clothes, knit scarves, and a few small ceramics. There was no sense of loss, only release. We drove to the church on Lexington, where they run a program for new arrivals in town. The coordinator accepted the items, bowing thanks again and again. I smiled back and watched my things go into storage, not as seized property, but as gifts in the right place. On the way home, Maeve cracked the window. Pine and cinnamon drifted in. It felt like my house had been cleansed. That week, I returned to art class. When I hung the Blue Ridge piece on the easel, the instructor, Mrs. Lorna, paused for a long time. This one has a very true calm, Claudia, she said. Not the kind that comes from fear, the kind that comes from having weathered a storm. I smiled, relieved. Maybe I learned to paint with breath instead of memory. Mrs. Lorna nodded. And that breath is telling me you've come back to yourself. The room went quiet for a few seconds, then soft clapping. I stood before the canvas, looking at the layered blue-violet ridges, gentle, distant, and stubborn. I saw myself there. That night at home, I opened a drawer and took out stationery. I hadn't handwritten a letter in years, but today I wanted to write to my 30-year-ago self, the woman who feared saying no, who thought silence was kindness. I wrote, slow and steady, Dear 37-year-old Claudia, don't be afraid to say no. Refusal doesn't kill love. It only removes those who loved you for their benefit. When you say no, you're saying yes to respect, to the peace you'll find later. Don't forget you're strong not because you don't hurt, but because you can. Stand inside the hurt and refuse to let it define you. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote on the front, To myself, who once mistook silence for virtue. Then I placed it in the wooden box with our wedding photo. That night I decided to make waffles, the dish I used to make only for guests. This time, I made it just for me. I mixed batter, cracked eggs, dusted in cinnamon and vanilla. The mixer hummed. Warm scent filled the kitchen. I ladled batter onto the iron and listened to the happy little sizzle. When the first batch was done, I plated it and drizzled honey. Crisp golden edges, soft center, gentle sweetness. I took a bite and closed my eyes. So this is what freedom tastes like: simple, warm, and delicious without needing anyone to share it. I took a photo and posted it in the Cooking for One group I joined a few weeks ago. Short caption: cinnamon honey waffles, a recipe for evenings alone but not lonely. Hearts rolled in, and a few comments popped up. Looks so cozy. Miss Claudia, can we have the recipe? Not lonely, I love that. I smiled and typed back, I'll post the recipe in the morning. Everyone deserves a batch made just for themselves. When everything was tidy, I turned off the lights and went to the bedroom. Night air slipped through the curtains. Vanilla and honey lingered in the room. I lay down, warm under the covers, body loose. For the first time in ages, I could feel the weight of sleep like a smooth river stone resting in a stream, cool, round, and calm. Right before I drifted off, I said quietly in my heart, "Thank you, Evan. I kept the house." More than that, I kept myself. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept deeply until dawn, in a home that held only truth, kindness, and the scent of fresh waffles. Time moved like still water. 3 months, then 6, no drama, no raised voices, just morning birds and the smell of coffee in the kitchen. I realized peace doesn't arrive all at once. It's built day by day. I set a new rhythm for myself. Monday mornings, gentle yoga at the community center where I practiced deep breathing, opening my chest, and letting go of what I can't control. Wednesdays, I tended the roses, trimming each cane, calling each bush by an old friend's name: Eleanor, Constance, Juliet. Friday afternoons, I went to Pack Library downtown for the seniors' book club. We read The Housekeeper and the Professor, then The Secret Garden, then Educated. Each book was a small mirror held up to my cracks, and instead of fear, I learned to look at them with compassion. Sometimes Dylan still appeared not directly, but through texts he sent via my brother, Marcus. One March evening, Marcus called, hesitant. "Dylan wants to know if you could help with a little money. He says Harper hasn't found a job yet, and baby Rowan is sick." I was quiet for a few seconds, looking out the window. Outside, late-season snow dusted the railing. I remembered the old days when Dylan had a fever and I sat up all night with a thermometer. I remembered Harper now, her face already fading in my mind. I spoke slowly and clearly. "Marcus, tell him this. Make a plan, get a job, then talk to me. No one rebuilds a future with an outstretched hand. I won't give money, but I'm willing to show him how to stand up." Marcus exhaled. "You're steady. Maybe that's exactly what he needs to learn." I smiled softly. No, that's what I needed to learn. And it took half a life to learn it. In April, I repaired the back porch roof where rain had stained the wood. I hired 2 local workers, watched them, then helped paint the boards. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the first-of-season breeze, and the house looked like it was taking a long, healthy breath after a long illness. I replaced the smart lock, installed a doorbell camera, and set the auto alerts. For the first time in years, I felt the house was truly mine in safety, not fear. Each morning, when the doorbell chimed lightly because the wind tripped the sensor, I smiled. "Thank you, Evan. See? I'm keeping my promise." Money-wise, I steadied too. Savings held thanks to a small investment Talia helped me reset. I opened a second account and named it Rainy Day, for health and surprises only. Watching the number climb slowly each month, I felt like I was tending a tree I knew would bloom even if it took time. One evening, I posted in the Women Over 60 Thrive Together group, "When our children grow up, mothers have the right to grow up too. When they grow, we get to grow as well, grow our voice, our boundaries, our self-respect." I didn't expect it, but within a few hours, dozens of responses poured in. "Claudia, you wrote the words in my heart." "Thank you. I thought I was selfish, now I don't." The line, "Mothers have the right to grow too." I printed it and stuck it on my mirror. I read each line, my heart warm like I was hearing a chorus where I'd just sung the first note. Turns out I was never alone. There's a whole generation of women who've quietly endured and are now relearning how to stand tall. At the end of May, Maeve asked me to take a road trip along the Blue Ridge Parkway. "We deserve to see summer in the mountains, Claudie," she said, "and we don't have to ask anyone's permission anymore." I laughed. 2 weeks later, I bought a wide-brimmed straw hat and tied on a pale blue ribbon, a small reward for myself. The trip lasted 4 days. Winding roads, cool wind, wildflowers bursting on both sides. Sometimes we stopped at an overlook and silently watched a sea of clouds drifting. Maeve said, "Time stands with the steadfast, Claudie. It doesn't make us young again, but it gives the truth back." I turned to her and smiled. And that truth, in the end, is the only place we can sleep well. After the trip, I came home with different energy. I started painting again, not just one piece, but a trio. I named them Home, Boundaries, Freedom. Home is the wooden porch with slanting sunlight across the rose pots. Boundaries is a half-open gate with blue morning mist outside. Freedom is the Blue Ridge at sunset violet blending into orange, peaceful and wide. I hung the 3 pieces in the living room, right where Evan's wedding photo used to be. Not to replace it, but to continue it because I know even true love needs boundaries to last. One afternoon, Talia called. "Claudia, are you free next weekend? I'd like to invite you to speak at the community center. Topic is protecting the assets and rights of older adults. I think your story will inspire people." I smiled lightly. "I've never spoken in front of a crowd. Just talk like you're telling Maeve. The true story is always the strongest." I hesitated a few seconds, then nodded. "Okay, I'll try." That night, I practiced in front of the mirror. The room reflected a 66-year-old woman, silver in her hair, but bright eyes, a low, clear voice, steady. I looked at myself and said, "My name is Claudia Hart. I used to think old age meant losing the right to decide. I was wrong. The moment I dared to say, 'That's enough,' I started living honestly." I paused, breathed deep, then smiled. "Not bad, Claudia." The next morning, I printed my speech and marked breathing points in red. On the table sat a cup of chamomile tea and a new notebook. The cover read, "Keep Growing." I opened the window. The early sun poured in, gold scattered across the wood floor. Outside, the roses blazed. Each bloom rose up without anyone teaching it how. I whispered, "Time has finally stood with us, not because we're stronger than anyone, but because we chose to be steadfast." The house was quiet, but I could hear my own heartbeat steady, sure, and calm. I knew the journey wasn't over, but I'd gone far enough never to return to the place where I was overrun, and for the first time in a long while, I felt not just surviving, but truly alive. One Sunday afternoon, as the sun slanted across the porch and gold light fell on each rose petal, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no name saved. I was going to let it ring out, but something made me pick up. "Mom?" The voice was husky, slow, a little shaky. I held my breath. "Dylan?" On the other end, a few seconds of silence. Then quick breaths, like someone fighting back tears. "Yes, it's me. I don't know where to start." I sat on the wooden porch chair and watched the rose fence tremble in the breeze. "Start with the truth," I said softly. He drew a long breath. "Harper and we broke up. She moved back to her mother's. And me, I'm working at a gas station out near Boone. I'm renting a small room. Not much, just a bed and an old radio. But it's peaceful." Dylan's voice caught halfway through. I didn't jump in. I just listened. Listened, like you listen to a river that once raged and is finally slowing itself down. "Mom," he went on, hesitant, "I'm not calling to ask for money. I'm not asking to move back in. I just wanted to say, you were right. I had to hit real life to understand what you did wasn't out of anger, it was to keep your dignity. Thank you for not letting me trample you." A light breeze swept across the porch, the rose leaves whispering. My eyes stung, but not from pain. For years I'd wished to hear an apology. When it finally came, I realized I didn't need to win. I just needed to see my child bow to his own mistakes. I said quietly, "Dylan, I hear you. But you know, an apology is only the first step. Keep growing through your actions." "I understand," he answered, voice small as wind. "I'll try." "No, I will." Then silence. I heard a car engine somewhere and a radio in the background playing "Take Me Home, Country Roads," the song Evan used to sing along to whenever we drove the Blue Ridge. "Do you remember this song?" I asked. Dylan gave a faint, genuine laugh. "Of course, Mom. Dad used to play it every time we went on a picnic." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Old song. Never out of date like honesty." We didn't say anything else. We let the music and the wind fill the space. When the call ended, I set the phone down and looked out at the soft blue of the distant mountains. A valley wind rose, cool and true. It felt like the Blue Ridge was breathing with me lighter, no longer clenched around old resentment. I didn't forgive right away. Forgiveness is a journey, not a moment. But something in me shifted, like a long shut window opening after a long winter. I stood and went inside. The room was full of afternoon light. Evan's Tiffany lamp glowed warm, dragonflies casting shadows on the wall. Whenever I look at it, I feel him there, quiet, kind, gently nodding. "Do you see, Evan?" I whispered toward the mountains. "The boy is finally learning to be a real adult." I smiled, then turned back to the easel. A new canvas waited, unsigned. I took a brush and wrote in small, even letters, "Claudia Hart, 66, still here, I'm still here." Only 3 words, but a declaration. I'm still here after being pushed to the basement, after papers demanding control, after cold words. I'm still here, calm, clear, and free. I opened the window. The scent of climbing roses poured in. The house murmured with leaves, with wind, and with the sound of my own deep breath. I knew, from now on, this home belongs to the one who knows how to keep it. Not just me, but all the women who've been shoved out of the very places they built, just because kindness was mistaken for weakness. I sat down, poured myself an herbal tea, opened my notebook, and wrote, "Today my son called and offered his first apology." I didn't cry, didn't shake, I just smiled, knowing time has finally stood with the steadfast. Peace doesn't come from beating someone, it comes from not losing yourself. Outside, the sun sank behind the Blue Ridge. Orange mixed with purple across the porch roof, bathing the house in quiet color. I went to the yard, set the teapot on the wooden table, and sat alone watching the evening come slowly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel empty. I felt enough. Enough to forgive without forgetting. Enough to love myself again without fearing judgment. Enough to know that even without anyone's approval, I still deserve peace. I looked up and saw a new star appear small and bright. "Thank you, time," I whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that sometimes boundaries are the highest form of love." If you've listened this far, tell me, where are you watching from? Maybe each of us has been Claudia at some point when kindness is tested, when lines blur, when love and self-respect force us to choose. If this story touched you, leave a comment, tell me what you think, or if you've been through something similar. Every share, every like, every time you hit subscribe doesn't just help me continue this journey. It helps carry the stories of mothers who learn to say no a little farther. Thank you for walking the whole way with me, so that today, in a home full of sunset and roses, I can smile and say, "I'm Claudia Hart, 66 years old, still here, still free. And at last, still at peace." As I stepped onto the church steps on the day of my son Lucas's wedding, he raised his hand and stopped me in front of hundreds of people. "You're not invited. You're no longer my family." I froze, the whispers around me stabbing into my skin like tiny needles. But instead of crying, I smiled. I tilted my head and replied softly, "All right, sweetheart. But before I go, remember to check your phone." I turned away, and no one knew that what was inside his phone would destroy the entire wedding. And no one knew that I, a mother cast aside, had set a trap long ago. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I walked down the cold stone steps of St. Augustine Church, my hands trembling slightly because the Portland breeze in May still carried a chill. I heard the church door close behind me, the sound of its hinges slicing slowly into my heart. I forced my steps to stay steady, my back straight, my chin lifted as if nothing had happened. But every step was an open wound. People passing by looked at me with a mix of pity and curiosity, and all I wanted was to leave before everything collapsed in their eyes. I, Eleanor Harrington, 66 years old, never imagined the day would come when my only son rejected me at the threshold of one of the most important days of his life. I had spent half my lifetime raising and sacrificing for Lucas Harrington. From the moment he lay in that tiny newborn room, to the day I dropped him off at college, to the day he moved out to start his adult life, I was always there. I always stood behind him. Yet today, that very child pulled the string that held my heart together and let it fall to the ground. Inside the church, the ceremony continued without me. I could hear the choir through the thick brick walls. That melody was something I once thought I would hear with tears of joy in my eyes. Not like this. Not with a heart encased in the ice that Lucas himself had placed there. I stood beside my car with one hand on the roof, trying to steady the trembling in my body. Not from the cold, not from humiliation, but from the slow, dull agony of feeling a blunt knife carve through my chest. My son believed I was no longer his family, but deep inside, another emotion flickered, a small flame I had been tending for months. Determination, preparation, quiet resistance. I knew what was waiting to explode as soon as Lucas opened the phone tucked inside his vest pocket. I knew that moment would come. And I knew that when it did, his life and mine would split into two completely different paths. But before I tell you about that moment, I need to go back. I want you to understand where everything began. Because no one in that church knew that once I had a family so happy it felt unbreakable, until it shattered. It all began 3 years ago, during the last autumn when I was still able to hold my husband's hand, Richard Harrington. He was tall, warm, with eyes that always smiled when they looked at me. Our small house on the outskirts of Portland was never luxurious, but it was always filled with laughter, the smell of fresh apple pie, and the sound of Lucas dribbling a basketball in the driveway. When Richard received the diagnosis, late-stage pancreatic cancer, it felt like the air was torn from my lungs. He had 6 months for me to cook his favorite meals, 6 months for him to hold Lucas a little longer each time they said goodbye, 6 months to arrange everything he would never see once he was gone. I once thought the cruelest thing in my life was watching the man I loved fade a little more each day, but I was wrong. The cruelest thing was realizing that his death didn't just take my husband, it pulled apart the bond between me and my son. In his final days, Richard held my hand tightly, his voice weak but clear. "Eleanor, promise me something. Tell me, Richard. Keep our financial assets a secret until Lucas is truly mature enough to handle them. He has a good heart, but he's too easily influenced." I nodded, tears falling onto his hand. "It all belongs to him. But don't tell him early. Only when you believe he's strong enough, then you tell him." The assets Richard referred to weren't a few valuable items. They were his investment portfolios, the manufacturing company he co-founded, and the savings he quietly built over 40 years of work. Richard wanted Lucas to be responsible before learning the truth. I promised, and I kept my word. Richard passed on a cold October morning. Lucas cried like a 5-year-old child, even though he was 29 at the time. I held my son close, hurting for him and for myself. I thought that after Richard's death, Lucas and I would become closer, but life doesn't follow our hopes. A year after Richard passed, Lucas began to find his footing again. I stayed by his side, cooking breakfast whenever he stopped by, helping him fix up his new apartment, listening to him talk about his job. I believed we were building a new kind of happiness, quieter, steadier. Then one day, Lucas came to my house with a young woman. Her name was Vanessa Hale. I remember that moment vividly, the moment my life took a sudden turn. Vanessa walked into my home as if she were stepping into a place she expected to own one day. Her dress hugged her body, her heels clicked sharply, and her eyes swept across the room as if she were appraising everything in sight. When Lucas introduced us, Vanessa smiled beautifully, but the smile never reached her eyes. It was the kind of smile I had seen many times in my life. A smile from someone who always wanted more than what they had. I was never a suspicious person. I had always believed in people's goodness. But from the very first day, Vanessa unsettled me. The way she asked about Richard's career, about the factory, about our savings, everything was too subtle to be accidental. Lucas, on the other hand, adored her. She seemed like the first light he'd seen since his father's passing. He laughed more, stood taller, worked harder. Love brought him back to life, but it also blinded him. I wanted to be happy for him. I wanted to believe Vanessa loved him sincerely, but every sly comment, every probing glance, every time she reached into parts of my home she didn't belong, made me uneasy. None of us want to admit that someone might approach our child for reasons other than love, but a mother's intuition, especially a mother my age, is rarely wrong. I didn't yet know that the day Lucas brought Vanessa into my home was the day I began losing my son. Slowly, quietly, piece by piece. But that is the story of the chapters that follow. For now, standing outside the church with the fading afternoon stretched beneath my feet, I understood one thing. The moment Lucas stopped me at the doors was not the first time I lost him. The first time was the day he brought Vanessa Hale into our home. From the day Lucas brought Vanessa into my house, the air inside every room seemed to change. Gone was the peaceful quiet of a woman living alone, and gone was the lingering warmth of my old family life. Something colder slipped in, like a breeze carrying the scent of a coming storm, and it walked into my house with Vanessa Hale's confident smile. Lucas stood behind her with a brightness in his eyes I hadn't seen since Richard died. It made me want to be happy, to believe this woman would heal him. But when Vanessa reached out to shake my hand, her hand soft and warm, her eyes were cold as a blade pressed to the throat. "I've heard you're a wonderful cook," she said sweetly. "Lucas tells me so much." I smiled politely, thanked her, But I noticed her gaze never stayed on my face. It moved to the wedding portrait of Richard and me, the antique clock Richard adored, the crystal glass set we bought in Europe decades ago. Her eyes weren't observing. They were assessing. At 66, I had met many types of people. I knew instantly that the look in Vanessa's eyes wasn't that of a woman in love. It was the look of someone calculating. Lucas didn't see it. He never would. During dinner, Vanessa sat across from me, legs crossed, shoulders tilted as if she were at an interview, but not the interviewee. No, she was evaluating me. "How long have you lived here?" she asked. "More than 30 years, I answered. This home was built with so much of my husband's effort. "Ah," Vanessa murmured, her eyes sweeping again. "It's beautiful. Portland is such a great place for real estate investment." Her tone tightened something inside my chest, not because of the words, but because of the voice. It belonged to someone who knew the value of everything in a home she hadn't lived in for even a day. Lucas was too busy smiling, telling stories. He didn't see that Vanessa paid attention only when the topic was money, property, or investments. I wanted to believe my instincts were wrong. I wanted to give her a chance. That changed the night she went down the hallway after dinner. I heard the faint click of a drawer, Richard's filing cabinet. He kept all his business documents there, stock papers, investment accounts, factory contracts. He always locked it. After he died, I continued locking it. That night, I forgot. When I heard the sound, my heart dropped. "Vanessa," I called. "Yes, I was just looking for the bathroom," she answered. She appeared at the corner in 2 seconds, too fast to convince me she had actually been searching for anything except what was inside that cabinet. Her eyes looked innocent, but I didn't buy it. "The bathroom is this way," I said with a smile, pointing in the opposite direction. "Oh, my mistake. Thank you," she said, placing a hand dramatically on her chest. Too dramatic. Too perfect. I glanced at the cabinet after she left. The third drawer was slightly ajar, just enough for someone to peek inside. It felt like someone had laid a filthy hand on my heart. In the weeks that followed, Vanessa slipped deeper into Lucas's life. And Lucas, my sweet, grieving, vulnerable son, fell deeper under her spell. He stopped visiting me. He stopped calling unless she needed something. He stopped seeing me as his home. One evening, as I brewed tea in the kitchen, I heard the cabinet again. I stepped into the hallway and found Vanessa standing there, her hand still on the drawer. "Oh, you scared me," she said, laughing lightly. "I thought Lucas left his jacket here." No one keeps jackets in a file cabinet. I looked at her long enough for her to sense the suspicion radiating off me. She only smiled, and in that smile I saw it clearly. She wasn't lost. She wasn't confused. She was looking, and she had found the folder marked with the logo of Richard Harrington's factory. I could tell by the position of the papers shifted from where I last left them. She turned away, but I stood frozen. Why did she care about those documents? Why did she always appear when my guard was lowest? Why did her eyes brighten only when Lucas spoke about Richard's success? I didn't have proof, only a heaviness in my chest that grew by the day. A mother's instinct, a woman's instinct, the instinct of someone who had lived long enough to recognize greed when it walked straight through her door. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. Vanessa Hale did not come for Lucas's heart, and I knew something else too. I had never feared another woman's smile the way I feared hers. It was the smile of a gathering storm, and that storm drew closer every day. I still remember clearly the afternoon Lucas came into my house with a brightness in his eyes I hadn't seen for a long time. Not the brightness of a man who is steady and happy. It was the brightness of a boy who has just been reassured that every dream can be bought if he tries a little harder. Lucas sat down in the chair across from me, his hands clenched, his voice trembling despite his attempt to steady it. "Mom, I proposed to Vanessa." Time seemed to stop for a few seconds. 3 months. Only 3 months. From the day Vanessa appeared in his life, I had been losing my son, little by little. But hearing he had proposed felt like someone had just pulled the rug out from under me, leaving me swaying without warning. I looked at my son. I wanted to ask a dozen questions. Have you thought this through? Do you understand what you're doing? Do you see what I see? But I also understood that one wrong word, one tone he didn't like, could make me lose my only child forever. "I'm happy for you," I whispered, even as my heart tightened in pain. "As long as you're happy." Lucas smiled faintly, but the smile faded quickly, as if he was about to say something that even he wasn't comfortable with. "Vanessa wants a big wedding. A really big one," Lucas said quietly. "She says it's the most important day of my life." Right away, I knew where this was going. Well, Vanessa hopes you can help cover part of the cost, just to make the ceremony perfect. I kept my composure. "Lucas, how much are we talking about?" He swallowed. "About $28,000. $28,000. The number dropped between us like a heavy stone. I knew my family had resources, but I had lived frugally and privately for years. What Richard left behind was not something I handed out to buy anyone's approval, but Lucas's eyes at that moment, both pleading and anxious, made it impossible for me to refuse. He was torn between me and Vanessa, and clearly Vanessa knew exactly how to make him feel guilty if he didn't provide for her. "Of course, I'll help," I said, and so I transferred the money, not because I wanted a lavish ceremony, but because I was afraid of losing more of my son. I thought that was it. I thought I had paid for a bit of fragile peace, but people like Vanessa don't know what enough means. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed close to 9 p.m. A message from Vanessa. "Ms. Eleanor, we need to talk. There are some important additional costs. Could we speak?" I sighed but called her back. She answered immediately. "Ms. Harrington," Vanessa said with a gentle laugh, her voice sweeter than honey, "I'm really grateful for your support, but I just reviewed things with the event coordinator and the price has increased. I need another $20,000 to keep everything as planned." I tightened my grip on the table. "Another $20,000? Vanessa, that's a lot of money." "Oh, I understand." Her tone instantly shifted to something sympathetic. "But Lucas really wants everything perfect, and I don't want him to be disappointed. No mother would want her son upset on his big day, right?" That sentence was a knife, small but sharp enough to make me close my eyes. I heard the calculation in every syllable, not a hint of hesitation, not a drop of shame. "Let me think," I said. "Yes, of course, take your time," Vanessa replied, then added one last line. "But the vendor only holds the reservation until tomorrow morning. If we lose it, we'll have to downgrade. And you know Lucas wouldn't want that." I understood clearly. That wasn't information. It was a threat wrapped in time pressure. After the call ended, I sat for a long time without moving. I looked at Richard's photo on the shelf. He was smiling gently as always, but I could almost hear him ask, "What are you doing, Eleanor? Who are you letting steer your life?" But I still transferred another $20,000. For Lucas. Only for Lucas. After that day, Vanessa's invisible power over my son became unmistakable. Lucas no longer made decisions on his own. Every answer, every opinion seemed filtered through Vanessa's expression, her glance before he spoke. If I asked Lucas something simple like, "Are you sure?" he immediately stiffened, looking toward Vanessa like a child afraid of getting something wrong. "Mom, Vanessa thinks this makes more sense," he said with an awkward smile. Vanessa didn't need to say much. A hand on Lucas's shoulder or a faint smile from her was enough for my son to take her side instantly. I began to see the changes clearly, not sudden but layered, thin as frost accumulating after a long night. Lucas grew more defensive, more irritable, and began treating my concerns as interrogations. I knew I was losing him, piece by piece, and I also knew I couldn't keep ignoring it. From the night Vanessa demanded another $20,000, I began recording everything: dates, amounts, reasons, contacts, receipts she sent, even her voice messages. I didn't know exactly what I was preparing for, but instinct told me that someday I would need all of this, not to protect myself, but to save my son from the woman he believed was the love of his life. On the quiet nights in my big, empty house, I sat at the kitchen table organizing every invoice. Sometimes my breath trembled with anger and helplessness. I had lived long enough to recognize what being used felt like, and every piece of Vanessa, her eyes, her smile, her voice, made that feeling stronger by the day. Sometimes I wondered whether I was judging too harshly. Maybe Vanessa was simply a young woman who liked luxury. But each time I saw her, the truth rose to the surface like white foam on water. She didn't love Lucas. She loved what Lucas could offer her. But what hurt me most was that Lucas didn't see it. My son, the child I held in my arms, the boy I comforted when he feared the dark, the young man I embraced when Richard died, was being led by someone who had no good intentions whatsoever. One evening, while I sat at the dining table looking at yet another invoice Vanessa sent, a thought crossed my mind. Maybe this was just the beginning, just the first door in a long corridor Vanessa had planned from the start. I set the paper down and closed my eyes. I knew, deep in my heart, that the thing I feared most had not yet arrived. And indeed, I had no idea that what I had just endured was only the opening act of a far more intricate scheme, one that would pull both me and my son into a storm we would never forget. After I transferred that additional $20,000, things between Lucas and me changed noticeably, but not in the way I once hoped. The mother and son closeness that had been natural and warm began to feel strained, careful, as if an unseen third person stood behind every conversation, pulling strings. And I knew who that person was. Lucas visited far less often, from coming every weekend to once every 2 weeks, then once a month, then so rarely that I had to mentally count how long it had been since we last ate together. I wanted to ask, to reach out, to draw him back in. But each time I opened my mouth, I heard Vanessa's voice in my head, sweet but sharp as a needle. What mother would bother her son when he's building his future? And so I stayed silent. One Saturday afternoon, I called Lucas to ask if he wanted to come for dinner. I had made rosemary roasted chicken, his favorite since childhood. Lucas answered, but his voice sounded distant, as if filtered through something cold. "Mom, Vanessa isn't feeling well tonight. I think I should stay home with her." "Vanessa isn't well? Then let me stop by." "No need, Mom," Lucas cut in quickly. "Vanessa doesn't want anyone over when she's resting, you understand." No, I didn't understand, but I still said, "All right, maybe another day." I set the phone down and looked at the roasted chicken steaming on the counter, the meal I had made for him so many times. The dish he once said was the best thing I cooked. Now it was just a tray of food for one, someone being slowly pushed out of her son's life. Other times weren't any better. Lucas canceled plans, or showed up late, or left early because Vanessa needed him. I started seeing the pattern clearly. Every time Lucas tried to spend time with me, Vanessa suddenly had an urgent matter. One evening, I tried stopping by their place. I didn't want to intrude. I just wanted to see if Lucas was okay. Vanessa opened the door with a flawless face of makeup and eyes that were ice cold. "Miss Eleanor," she said slowly, "you came without letting us know." "I wanted to bring Lucas some fresh-baked bread." "Yes, but you understand, don't you? Newlyweds need private time." She said it with a smile, but the coldness was unmistakable. "I can come in for just a minute." "It's really not a good time," Vanessa insisted, cutting me off. "Next time, just message first. We're very busy." Message first to enter my son's home? I stood there for a few seconds, gripping the tray tightly to keep calm. The door closed the moment I stepped back, like I was a stranger who had knocked on the wrong house. Walking down the stairs, my throat tightened. The bread in the tray was still warm, but my heart felt frozen. Another day, I learned something that still stings even now. A neighbor's daughter accidentally sent me a screenshot from Instagram stories, a small family gathering at Lucas and Vanessa's home. I saw Lucas, Vanessa, her mother, her relatives, everyone smiling, toasting, and in the corner, the group chat name appeared. Hale Family Circle, the Hale family. I zoomed in. There were 30 unread messages, and at the top was a small line of text. Lucas Harrington added by Vanessa, their family, and me? I, the woman who raised Lucas from infancy, who held his hand on his first day of school, who comforted him when Richard died, wasn't included in his life online or offline, not added, not mentioned, erased. I began noticing that the phrases Lucas used weren't his own. "I need to focus on my new family, Mom." "Vanessa says I need to prioritize correctly. I can't keep working around your schedule. A wife is who I should take care of first." I sat across from him as he said these things. I watched the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, just for a second, before his shoulders stiffened, as if he needed to prove something. I knew. I knew those words weren't from my son's heart. They were Vanessa's echoes, her subtle, steady control wrapping around Lucas like a trap. One October evening, I sat in my living room with my phone in hand, waiting for a birthday message from Lucas. No call, no gift, just a few words. That was all I wanted. 10 p.m., 10:15, 11. At 11:48, the screen lit up. "Happy birthday, Mom." Nothing more. No emoji, no sign-off, no call. Just 3 cold words. 3 words typed by someone who felt like a stranger. I set the phone down and felt a hollow ache in my chest. In my 66 years, I don't think I had ever felt so alone. Not because no one was beside me, but because the only person I had left was drifting beyond my reach, and I couldn't pull him back. That night, I cried for the first time in months. Not because I was insulted, but because I realized I had been pushed to the outer edge of my son's life in small, soft, but merciless steps. Vanessa didn't want me to lose Lucas all at once. She wanted me to lose him slowly, quietly, without a trace. But tears also have limits. When a heart no longer has room for pain, patience turns into vigilance. And vigilance, when pushed far enough, turns into determination. I no longer saw Vanessa as simply the woman Lucas loved. I began to see her as someone trying to build an invisible prison around my son and tightening it one ring at a time. I knew I couldn't just stand by and watch, but I didn't know where to start. Until that night, when the house was quiet. I was washing my teacup when my phone vibrated. A message from Vanessa, sent directly to me the first time in weeks. I dried my hands and opened it. Only 7 words, but those 7 words sent a chill down my spine, as if someone had thrown open a window and let a storm crash into the room. "We need to talk about your house." I froze in the kitchen, and at that very moment, I fully woke up. There was no doubt left. Vanessa didn't just want to control Lucas, she wanted to take everything Lucas could inherit, everything Richard left to me, and her next step would certainly be me. I set the phone on the table. A flame rose inside me. No more tears, no more waiting, no more telling myself, this will pass. I knew the storm had truly begun, and I also knew, this time, I was no longer afraid. When I read the message Vanessa sent the night before, I knew she wouldn't stop, but I didn't expect the next blow to come so quickly and so ruthlessly that my entire body went cold, like someone had poured a basin of ice water straight into my chest. The next morning, Lucas called me. His voice was excited, trembling, like a child who had just received a scholarship, not a grown man standing at the edge of a storm about to tear his life apart. "Mom, Vanessa has good news." Good news. Those 2 words fell into my ears like lead. She is pregnant. I froze. One hand still held a dish towel, the other gripping the phone so tightly the knuckles turned white. Vanessa, pregnant. I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. Not because I was afraid of having a grandchild. I had hoped for one for a long time. But with everything I had seen in Vanessa, her calculating eyes, her subtle control, her sweet words dripping poison one drop at a time, and the web she was spinning around Lucas, I knew instantly this wasn't a miracle. It was a strategy, a chess piece placed in the perfect square. Lucas continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Mom, God, I'm gonna be a dad." I swallowed hard. "Congratulations, sweetheart." "Mom, we're coming over tonight. There's something important we want to discuss." Something important. I knew for certain it wouldn't be about baby names. That evening, when the doorbell rang, I had prepared myself, but I didn't expect Vanessa to show up with one hand on her stomach, a stomach that looked exactly the same as a week earlier, and a triumphant smile like she had just reached the final step of her plan. "Miss Eleanor," Vanessa said, her voice filled with deliberate sweetness, "you're going to be a grandmother." Lucas stood beside her, his eyes glowing, as if nothing in the world could compare to that moment. I invited them in. Vanessa didn't wait. She walked straight into the living room as if it had been her house all along. She stroked her stomach again and again, a weak but overly performed gesture, like an amateur actress forcing herself into character. After a few polite questions, Vanessa glanced at Lucas and nodded slightly. A signal. Lucas took a folder out of his bag. He placed it on the table and slid it toward me. "Mom, we've thought this through." "About where the baby will live." Vanessa cut in immediately, her voice soft but her eyes sharp as a knife scraping across the table. "Our 1-bedroom apartment isn't suitable. We're really worried." I didn't say anything. I didn't touch the papers either. Lucas continued. "So, Vanessa suggested a good idea for the whole family." Family. Why did that word sound like an accusation when it came out of his mouth? "Miss Eleanor." Vanessa tilted her head, smiling soft as cotton but with eyes cold as steel. "Your house is too big. You live alone, it's wasteful and tiring. You're getting older. I tightened my hands on my lap. At this stage of life, you should be resting, not cleaning a whole big house. I still stayed silent, and then she placed the real statement on the table like a stone dropped into a still lake. So we think you should transfer the ownership of this house to Lucas. No more hints, no more polite wording, just cold bluntness so shocking I doubted my own hearing. Lucas took a deep breath as if he were doing something noble. For me. For the baby, Mom. Vanessa pushed the stack of papers closer to me with one elegant, commanding finger. You just need to sign here. We prepared all the paperwork. I flipped through the documents quickly, not in detail, but enough to see the horror. No protection for me. No right to stay. No right to use the house. Nothing. If I signed, the house would belong entirely to Lucas, and Vanessa, I knew for certain, would want me out the moment it suited her. Lucas looked at me, and the eyes weren't my son's anymore. They were the eyes of someone trapped in a tunnel, believing he had only one way out. Mom, don't you want to help us? Lucas, I said softly, have you really thought this through? Vanessa let out a small laugh, a pitying laugh, firm as a slap. Ms. Eleanor, don't be selfish. You're old and living in a big house like this. For what? Meanwhile, your son and your future grandchild have to squeeze into a tiny apartment? I looked directly at Vanessa, this time without avoiding. If you truly cared about the baby, you'd want stability, not someone else's property. Vanessa's expression darkened, shifting into something colder. I don't see this as someone else's property. This is a family home, and Lucas is your family, isn't he? I smiled, a smile full of pain but without tears. Family doesn't take from each other. Lucas frowned. Mom, what is that supposed to mean? Vanessa only wants what's best for me and the baby. The baby. He was talking about a child I was certain Vanessa was not carrying. I clenched my hands, then said each word clearly. I will not sign. The living room turned cold as a cellar. Vanessa leaned back, arms crossed, eyes narrowing at me as if assessing an opponent. Then you're only making things harder for Lucas. She turned to Lucas, her voice trembling for exactly one perfect beat. Sweetheart, if your mother doesn't care about our family, then I don't know how our baby will live. Lucas immediately panicked, eyes reddening. Vanessa, don't cry. Mom, can't you see we need you? No, I saw everything clearly. I saw Vanessa squeezing Lucas's wrist under the table, lightly but with the force of command. I saw the fear in my son's eyes, not fear of me, but fear of losing Vanessa. I saw that I was facing a plan months in the making, pushing me step by step into surrender. And I saw one painful truth. Lucas was no longer on my side. I inhaled deeply, then stood up. You two should go home. Vanessa shot to her feet, her gaze slicing across me with open hostility, then dragged Lucas toward the door as if pulling a possession behind her. Just before disappearing, Lucas turned back. Mom, why can't you try to understand us? The door slammed shut. I stood still for a long time. Only one thought echoed in my mind. They had planned this for a very long time. From the moment Vanessa first stepped into my home, her eyes scanning the file cabinet, from the moment she began isolating Lucas from me, from the moment she demanded the absurd wedding expenses, and now, right in the middle of my living room, she dared call me selfish in the house my husband left to me. I wasn't trembling anymore. I wasn't hurting anymore. I had only one thing left, the will to survive. I walked straight to my office. My hand trembled slightly as I opened my contacts.
I dialed the number I had saved for years, never imagining I'd call it because of my own son. The phone rang once. A deep, familiar voice answered, "Grant Smith speaking." I closed my eyes, taking a long breath. "Grant, I need you. Please. Immediately." And that was the moment I officially stepped into the battle Vanessa thought I would lose from the very first move. But she didn't know one thing. I raised Lucas for more than 30 years. I lived beside Richard, a man of formidable strength, all my life. I was never an easy target, and Vanessa would soon learn that. I had never experienced a morning so long and dense as that one. After speaking with Grant Smith the night before, I hardly slept. I sat in the living room, the curtains shifting slightly with Portland's early winter breeze, my hands gripping a cup of tea that had gone cold without me noticing. My mind kept turning, not from fear, but from a painful clarity. I was dealing with a woman who had no limits, no morals, and no intention of stopping once she chose her target. Around 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. Grant's investigator, Mr. Walter Briggs, a tall man with deep-set eyes and a warm but sharp voice, stood at my door holding a black document case. "Mrs. Harrington," he said with a small nod, "we've gathered the information you requested." I invited him into the dining room. He placed the case on the table and slid it toward me like one would present crucial evidence in a boardroom. "I need you to brace yourself," Briggs said. "What we found isn't pleasant." I drew a breath. I expected that. But I don't think I had ever expected something so painfully accurate. When he opened the case, the documents were organized by category: finances, relationships, legal history, personal background. I recognized immediately the meticulousness of Briggs's work. No excess detail, no irrelevant line, and the very first line made my blood run cold. Legal name, Vanessa Hale. Influencer profile fabricated. Briggs pushed a stack of color-printed photos toward me. The photos Vanessa posted online: luxury homes, expensive cars, vacations, designer brands, all glamorous on the surface, but he pointed to each one. All of these locations were shot in staged rental units and hourly photo studios, he explained. Most of the handbags and jewelry are rentals. None of it belongs to her. I had suspected it, but I didn't think it would be this empty. Briggs continued. She owes about $95,000 in credit card debt and high-interest private loans. Here's the summary. A long sheet of paper, numbers in bright red, packed with debts from banks, credit companies, and worst of all, 3 loans from private lenders with interest rates bordering on extortion. How can she maintain such a luxurious lifestyle? I asked. Because she doesn't, Briggs replied. She only creates the illusion. He opened the next section, romantic relationships, affair with a gym trainer. I looked at a photo captured from the gym's camera. Vanessa walking arm in arm with a man at least 5 years younger, far more intimate than casual friends. Then pictures of them entering a hotel. The dates matched the time she began dating Lucas. I felt my heart being squeezed hard, not because I was hurt on Lucas's behalf, but because I could see my son was simply one of her financial options to cling to. Briggs pulled out another set of documents. "And this is the most important information," he said slowly. Vanessa once faked a pregnancy to extort money from a businessman in Seattle. When the truth came out, she disappeared before the man could sue. I stared at him without blinking. "Fake pregnancy," Briggs emphasized. "She has done it before, and she might be doing it again." Not might. I knew for certain. Vanessa was never pregnant. Next, Briggs opened the section labeled Psychological Manipulation. Do you remember those arguments that seemed to happen by chance between you and Lucas? He asked. I nodded. They've been happening more often lately. Not by chance, Briggs said. We found messages Vanessa sent to Lucas. She fed him all kinds of ideas, that you were discouraging him, that you were selfish, that you were jealous of his new life. I closed my eyes. Each sentence was a blade reopening wounds that had never healed. She told Lucas, Briggs continued, if your mother doesn't support us, that means she doesn't want our family to be happy. I felt my hands tremble, but I set them on the table to steady myself. I knew I had been pushed away from my son, but learning it was a deliberate plan. Made it all even more painful. Briggs flipped to the final page, and here is her actual plan. I read the first line and almost couldn't breathe. Objective: seize ownership of assets by declaring Mrs. Harrington legally incompetent. Briggs explained. She has connections with someone working at a legal consulting office. They are trying to build preliminary documentation, claiming you are forgetful, no longer fully aware, and unfit to manage your own assets. I let out a dry laugh. Incredible, I whispered. She wants to have me declared incompetent? Yes, and once that happens, Lucas, the legal husband, would be appointed to manage all assets, including the house. She would control everything indirectly. I collapsed back in my chair. 30 years of marriage with Richard, all the keepsakes, all the hard work, all the memories. Vanessa wanted to take everything with one signature and a fabricated file. I inhaled deeply and steadied my voice. Briggs, I need to know every piece of evidence you gathered. It's all here, he said, sliding the folder toward me. Messages, emails, audio recordings, debt papers, photos. We even have video of Vanessa meeting the gym trainer at the same time she told Lucas she was going to a prenatal appointment. Exactly as I suspected. The storm had grown into a full-blown hurricane. But for the first time, I felt I wasn't standing alone in the wind. I had evidence. I had a lawyer. And most importantly, I had the truth on my side. That evening, I sat alone in my office, the desk lamp casting light over the pages spread out before me. I reviewed every piece of evidence, carefully taking notes in a small notebook, a habit Richard had taught me when he managed the factory. Nothing is stronger than a well-organized file. I opened my laptop and created 3 copies of everything, one on the computer, one on an external drive, and one stored in the cloud with 2-step authentication. I did not allow myself a single mistake, not one. While taping together the last set of documents, my phone rang. It was Grant Smith, Eleanor. His voice calm but serious. Briggs told me everything. You must be extremely careful. Vanessa is clever in a dangerous way. Your strike must land at the right time, in the right place. Otherwise, she will flip the situation. I know, I said, but I'm ready. There's something important, Grant added. If you want to break Vanessa's plan, Lucas must see the truth with his own eyes. Someone like Lucas, he doesn't believe stories. He believes what he hears and sees directly. I stayed silent for a few seconds. Then a thought flashed through my mind, sharp as a blade. The phone. Lucas's phone, every call, every message, every whisper she breathed into his ear, every argument they thought I never noticed, every lie. If I could access it, if I could show Lucas exactly what Vanessa said about him, about me, about the assets, it would be a blow she could not defend against. I looked up, my voice calm enough to surprise even myself. Grant, I said, I know what I have to do. Are you sure? I'll use Lucas's phone, I replied. and I'll let Vanessa reveal the truth herself. I closed my laptop. The Portland night was pounding rain against the window, each drop like a drum urging me forward. I was no longer the mother pushed to the margins. I was the survivor, the one preparing to strike back, and Vanessa Hale would never see it coming. I never thought there would come a day when my own son, the child I held, raised, comforted for more than 30 years, would block me the way someone blocks a nuisance caller. But he did, without warning, without hesitation. The morning after I refused to sign the house transfer, Lucas disappeared from my life in the literal sense. When I called to ask if he had calmed down, a cold, automated voice answered, "The number you have dialed is not reachable." I tried texting. 2 hours later, the message failed to deliver. I checked social media, Messenger, Instagram, even Facebook, and then I saw the most painful sentence a mother can read. "You can't message this user." I had been blocked completely. No door left to reach my son. I sat silently in the living room, listening to the wall clock click forward, each beat like a countdown of my relevance in Lucas's life, and each one tightening my chest. I had braced myself for Vanessa to keep attacking, to keep lying, to keep poisoning Lucas's mind. But I never imagined she could push him to erase every line of contact with me in a single night. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I sent a small gift for the baby in Vanessa's belly, a knitted blanket I made myself, the same pattern I once used for Lucas when he was little. I knew Vanessa wasn't pregnant, but Lucas believed she was. And I wanted my son to know I still loved him, no matter what side he stood on. 3 days later, the package came back, written across the box in marker, "Return to sender." I stood over the box like a ghost. My hands shook so badly I couldn't lift the lid. Something inside me fell into a deep, empty pit. Not anger, not embarrassment. It was the feeling of being erased from my son's life with a gesture as simple as a scribble. That night, I turned on the kitchen light, made a cup of peppermint tea, and sat down as I had every evening since Richard passed. But that night, the tea didn't smell fragrant. It tasted bitter, very bitter. By the 3rd week, I created a hidden account using a false name and a default profile picture. I never thought I would be pushed to the point of watching my son from the shadows like this. But if he wouldn't let me enter his life through the front door, I had no choice but to look through the cracks. I searched for Vanessa first, and it took me less than a minute. Her page was updated constantly. Colorful photos, bright smiles, captions about happiness, family, preparing for motherhood. Hundreds of comments under each post praising her. Strangers saw her as an angel ready to become a mother. I watched each picture, each video. In a 15-second clip, Vanessa placed her hand on her belly and gently turned, smiling softly. A smile I knew very well was nothing more than performance. No slight skin stretch, no change in posture, no heavier breathing, no signs of pregnancy. But the clip was flooded with congratulatory comments. And then I saw the post that made my heart ache so sharply I had to grip the table to stay standing. Our baby shower. A lavish party. Giant floral arches, multi-layered cake, piles of gifts, gold and pink balloons. In the photos were Vanessa's family, Vanessa's friends, a few of Lucas's co-workers. But not me. Not a single trace suggesting I ever existed in that world. I stared at the picture for a long, long time. Everyone in it was smiling. Vanessa stood in the center, hand on her perfectly flat stomach, eyes sparkling as if she were living a perfect life, while I, The mother of the man about to become a father was erased from everything simply because I stood between her and the assets my husband left behind. Every day after that was another knife, not because I was hated, but because I was forgotten. I asked myself over and over, so many times the question itself frightened me. If I died right now, would Lucas even know? One night, I walked into my bedroom, turned on the lamp, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared into nothing. At 66, I had lost my husband, lost the family I had known for decades, and now I was close to losing my only child. People say loneliness is being in a crowded room and still feeling empty. But for me, loneliness was looking at my phone and knowing for certain it would not light up with Lucas's name. And then I remembered something Richard once said in his final years, when he watched me take care of everything, even when my back ached and my eyes were tired. Eleanor, love isn't something you endure forever. It has to be protected, and sometimes it has to be released to save yourself. His words echoed as gently as breath, yet strong enough to pull me out of the dark. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't cry. I stood up, turned on the office light, opened the file Briggs gave me, and began sorting every piece of evidence into categories: finances, fraud, infidelity, manipulation, fake pregnancy, attempted asset seizure. I wrote clear titles for each section, numbered everything, added notes. Each page I placed on the table was a blade turned back, sharper, more precise. Each file I backed up was a brick in the wall I was building to protect myself. Each piece of evidence I highlighted was a reminder I was not defeated. I gathered everything into a counterattack file, almost as thick as my wedding album. But unlike that album, this one held no memories. It held truth strong enough to sway any court. When I closed the file, it was midnight. The desk lamp made the pages glow like a lantern. I laid my hand on the cover, feeling a confidence I hadn't felt in months. Just as I reached to turn off the light and head to bed, my phone vibrated. A phone call at 12:17 a.m. The screen showed only one name: Lucas. I held my breath. And just like that, after 6 months of being erased, my son was calling me in the middle of the night. The late-night call made my heart skip a beat. I stared at Lucas's name pulsing on the screen, my hands trembling slightly as if touching it might shatter everything. 6 months without a single word from him. 6 months hearing his voice only through Vanessa's videos. 6 months of being turned into a ghost. I answered, "Mom." Lucas's voice was small, unsteady, but not with emotion. It sounded like someone reading lines they had been told to recite. Vanessa said, "You can come to the wedding." I can. Not that he wants me there. Vanessa allows it. I heard every layer of meaning buried beneath that sentence. I didn't respond right away. I looked out the window. The thin snow over the neighbor's roof, the streetlight casting a pale gold glow across the glass. The whole world seemed silent, as if listening to this conversation. "What time is the wedding?" I asked. 1:30, but you should come early. Vanessa wants to test the seating arrangement." I closed my eyes. My seat. A decorative prop. Nothing more. "All right," I said, "I'll come." Lucas exhaled in relief so clearly I could hear it through the phone. "Thank you, Mom. Vanessa will be happy." Vanessa, not Lucas. The call ended, leaving behind a hollow space inside me, dark but also sharp, like a blade forming its edge. I knew the only reason they invited me, to make Vanessa's family look good, to have photos of the bride and groom beside the forgiven mother, to use me as a backdrop for their staged perfection. I set the phone on the table, and I smiled, A small smile without joy, only the clarity of someone who had finally seen the whole game. If they thought I would come to bow my head, they would soon learn I was going there to finish this. The next morning, I met with Grant Smith again. He sat in his darkwood office, fingers interlaced, eyes studying me as if wanting to confirm my resolve one last time. Eleanor, you understand that after this strike, nothing will ever go back to the way it was, right? I don't want things to go back, I replied. I want the truth to speak. Grant nodded, then called someone in. A middle-aged man entered, chalk dust on his jacket, a magnifying loupe hanging around his neck, the technician Grant had mentioned. "This is Mr. Cal," Grant said. "Professional, absolutely discreet." Mr. Cal set his laptop on the table. "You want access to your son's iCloud?" His voice was low, steady. I nodded. "I need whatever Vanessa has said to Lucas, and I need to send something for him to see right at the wedding." Mr. Cal got to work immediately, fingers moving so fast across the keyboard I couldn't keep up. I gave him everything I knew: Lucas's birthday, old passwords, security questions. He tried possibility after possibility with patient precision. After just 12 minutes, he looked up, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "We're in." My heart dropped a beat. Part of me wanted this to succeed. Another part feared facing the truth head on. Messages, photos, notes, voice memos, location history, all of it appeared before us. Mr. Cal filtered through the keywords Grant requested. Pregnancy, money, moms, a property, cells, a plan, doctor, he fake. One conversation after another surfaced, like mirrors wiped clean, revealing a truth I already knew, yet still hurt to see. Vanessa pushed Lucas to cut all contact with me. Vanessa fabricated prenatal visits. Vanessa bought fake ultrasound images online. Vanessa discussed with friends how to pressure Lucas into demanding the house. Vanessa called me an old obstacle. And worst of all, Vanessa promised Lucas, "When you have the house in your name, you'll be the owner. I'll take care of everything else." I clenched my fists, feeling like someone had shoved me off a cliff and caught me right before I hit the ground. Grant looked at me seriously. "Eleanor, this is gold-level evidence." I inhaled. "I want these messages sent straight to Lucas's phone, but not immediately." Mr. Cal nodded. "You want a timer?" "Yes." "For when?" "Right when the ceremony begins," I said. "When Lucas and Vanessa are standing before everyone, when no one can take back their words, when no one can run from the truth." Mr. Cal started setting it up. Messages sent from Lucas's own iCloud to Lucas's own phone. Messages that cannot be deleted before viewing, locked on the screen until opened. I chose 4 items. The entire conversation where Vanessa admits she is not actually pregnant. Photos of Vanessa with the gym trainer. Evidence of her debt and her plan to seize assets. A recording of her calling Lucas. Easy to control. I set the time. 2:40 p.m., the exact moment of the marriage vows. Everything exactly as Grant wanted. A strike that cannot be dodged, cannot be edited, cannot be erased. When it was done, Mr. Cal closed the laptop. "The switch is flipped," he said. "The clock will take care of the rest." I stood, thanked them both, and left the office. I knew I had crossed a line I could never step back from, but I also knew if I didn't move forward, Vanessa would crush Lucas's life. And mine. The wedding day arrived. The Portland sky was gray and cold, the wind curling under my collar and raising goosebumps along my skin. I chose my best dress, the navy gown Richard gave me on our 18th anniversary. I draped a silk scarf over my shoulders, added a touch of lipstick, smoothed my hair. not to impress anyone, but to walk into battle with my head held high. When I reached the church, I immediately felt the disapproval radiating from Vanessa's family. They looked at me like a defective decoration someone had mistakenly included in their perfect tableau. Vanessa stood near the entrance. When she saw me, she smiled, but the smile was sharp as a pin. "Oh, Mrs. Eleanor, you made it after all," I answered softly. "I always keep my word." "Hope you know where your seat is," Vanessa said, glancing at her mother. "Not everyone is a main character." I didn't reply. I simply looked at her for one brief second, a second long enough for her to realize I was no longer the trembling mother she used to strike at so easily. Lucas walked over. His eyes were uneasy but cold, like someone balancing precariously between two worlds. "Mom, please don't do anything to upset Vanessa, okay?" I placed a hand on his arm. "No, sweetheart, I don't need to do anything." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I gave a small, subtle smile, like one of the lessons Richard used to teach me. Not every truth requires words. Sometimes a well-timed look is enough. I tilted my head slightly and whispered, "Check your phone, son." Lucas squinted, confused. But Vanessa, her face drained of color instantly. I left the church before the ceremony began. I didn't want to stand there. I didn't need to witness the moment everything collapsed. I returned home, hung my scarf, turned on the kettle, and sat in the armchair by the window, the one Richard always loved. 2:39 p.m., the clock hand crept forward. 2:40 p.m., the distant church bells rang, and I knew. Right at that moment, Lucas's phone was vibrating in rapid bursts. Right at that moment, the truth was breaking open in front of my son's eyes. Right at that moment, Vanessa Hale was losing everything she'd carefully constructed. I set my teacup down, folded my hands, and whispered softly, "Richard, now watch how we protect our family." 2:40 p.m. The moment I had waited weeks for, not with gloating, but with a strange sense of calm, was unfolding somewhere just a few blocks away. I wasn't there, but from what guests later told me, combined with what I imagined from the messages delivered right on schedule, the entire wedding scene formed sharply in my mind, vivid enough that I could almost hear Lucas's breath falter when he saw his phone screen. When the church bells began, Lucas stood beside Vanessa at the altar, hands loosely holding her bouquet, his face tense with nerves mixed with exhaustion. Vanessa looked more radiant than ever. Her white gown fitted perfectly, a long veil cascading behind her, her smile triumphant, deeper than usual because she believed everything had fallen into place, until Lucas's phone buzzed in his pocket. Once, then 3 times, then continuously, like frantic warnings from a failing heartbeat. At first, Lucas ignored it. The officiant began the opening words, but the phone buzzed again, longer, stronger. Guests turned to look. Vanessa shot Lucas a sharp glance, tightening her jaw but keeping her smile fixed for the cameras. "Turn it off," she hissed through her teeth. "It's rude." But something in Lucas, some buried instinct, told him to look. He reached into his pocket and glanced at the screen. A message from himself, from his own iCloud account. "Lucas, look at this." He frowned and opened it, and in the next second, Lucas's knees nearly gave out. Video 1, Vanessa removing the fake pregnancy belly. The screen faded from black into a clear image of Vanessa in the gym restroom. She turned in front of the mirror, then used both hands to peel off a thin silicone layer from her stomach, rolled it up, and tossed it into her bag. On the mirror, her reflection showed a smirk. Smug, satisfied, nothing like the gentle persona she showed Lucas. At the ceremony, Lucas froze. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His hands shook so violently the phone almost slipped. Guests whispered, "What's wrong with him? What's on the phone? Is the bride turning pale?" Seeing Lucas's face drain of color, Vanessa rushed closer, tugging on his sleeve. "Lucas, what's wrong? You're scaring me." But before Lucas could answer, the second message popped up. Audio. Vanessa plotting to have me declared incompetent to seize my assets. A short recording, one I had listened to many times before deciding to send it. Vanessa's voice, cold as ice. "If his mom won't sign, we'll prove she's mentally unfit. A doctor only needs to check a few boxes. Once the house is transferred, he's the legal owner. That's it." Then another woman's voice. "And the baby?" Vanessa's dry laugh. "We won't need it anymore. I just want the house and the Harrington name." The moment Vanessa's laugh echoed through the audio in the church, it was as if someone had punched Lucas straight in the chest. "No. No way," Lucas stammered. Vanessa tried to touch his arm. Lucas jerked her hand away. Guests began standing up, lifting their phones, recording everything. Another message came in. Lucas opened it and was so stunned he nearly dropped his phone. Photos. Vanessa cheating with the gym trainer, images from different days, them holding hands, hugging, even walking into a hotel room together. Vanessa screamed, her voice sharper than every echo in the church. "That's photoshopped. Someone wants to ruin our happy day. Lucas, you have to believe me." But Lucas could no longer stand firmly. Everything he had believed for the past year was collapsing into pieces right before his eyes. Then the final message popped up. Debt and fraud evidence. A long list. All the debts. All the past scams. All the plans to drain Lucas financially. All the ways she mocked him for being easy to control. Vanessa lunged forward to snatch the phone, but Lucas stepped back just in time. His face turned ghostly pale. "Vanessa," Lucas said, his voice trembling and broken. "You're not pregnant." The words cracked through the church like thunder. The entire room fell silent, then erupted into chaos. Guests whispered loudly, some covering their mouths, some zooming their phones toward the bride, some calling others over to look. Vanessa shrieked, "No, it's not like that. You're being tricked. Someone edited." "But why does everything match?" Lucas shouted, losing control for the first time in his life. His voice split the air, raw with the deepest betrayal a man could experience. Every head in the room turned toward the bride. Vanessa pretended to cry, collapsing to her knees and covering her face. But no one believed those tears. It looked like an amateur performance, forced, hollow, desperate. At that moment, a guest rushed forward to steady Lucas, who looked like he might fall. Another dragged Vanessa back as she began thrashing and screaming. "No, you have to believe me. None of this is real. Your mother ruined us." Lucas stared straight at her, eyes bloodshot but unwavering. "I have nothing left to believe." Then he turned and ran out of the wedding. No one reacted fast enough. No one chased him. Only Vanessa remained, surrounded by cameras, whispers, and the ruins of the future she never imagined would collapse. Lucas ran across the parking lot, yanked open his car door, started the engine, and sped off like a man with no bearings. But the heart always knows its way home. And the road Lucas chose was not to Vanessa's house, not to the reception hall, not to the luxury apartment they rented for their happy family photos. It was to my home. While I sat in the living room, my hand resting on a cup of tea gone cold, watching the clock tick to minute 41, The screech of brakes rang out on my porch. Then frantic footsteps. Then a pounding on the door, not knocking, but hammering, as if the hand doing it was shaking with pain and despair. Mom, open the door!" Lucas's voice, the voice of the son I thought I had lost forever. I stood, opened the door, and Lucas collapsed at my feet, eyes red, still clutching the phone filled with the messages I had delivered into his life at exactly 2:40 p.m. "Mom, I'm sorry." I looked down at my grown son, broken, crumbling, on the same doorstep where Richard had once carried him inside for the first time when he could barely walk. In that moment, I understood one thing clearly. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in years, I wasn't fighting alone. Lucas fell to his knees on my porch, as if his legs could no longer support the weight of the truth and the shame crushing his heart. Snow speckled the shoulders of his suit jacket, his breath shivering in the cold Portland air, but it wasn't the weather making him shake. It was everything he had just watched come apart at the wedding. "Mom," Lucas choked out, gripping the door frame like it was the only solid thing left in his life. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I looked at my grown son kneeling there, eyes bloodshot, and in that moment, every wall I had built to protect myself these past months seemed to crumble. I didn't see a man who had turned his back on his mother. I saw the little boy I used to carry, the boy whose tears I once wiped away, the boy I held close when he stumbled for the first time. I knelt in front of him and placed my hand on his cheek. His skin was hot with tears, his eyes filled with panic, begging for one simple thing, so simple it made my chest tighten. "Please tell me you're still here." I pulled him into my arms, held him tightly as if I could pull him back from the edge Vanessa had pushed him toward. "My son," I whispered, "I never left." Lucas pressed his face into my shoulder, sobs shaking through him in waves. His whole body trembled like a child abandoned for too long who had finally found shelter. I helped him inside, made hot tea, draped a towel over his shoulders. He sat frozen for a long time, hands covering his face, eyes hollow as if trying to piece together the fragments of a life shattered in front of an entire room of people. "Mom?" Lucas finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you let me turn against you like that?" I set the cup down. "Because if I had told you, you wouldn't have believed me. You were trapped inside the reality Vanessa built. Only when you saw it with your own eyes could you step out." Lucas nodded weakly, tears falling again. "I was so stupid. I let someone like her control my mind. I hurt you. You were a victim," I said softly, "not a villain." He pressed his face into my palm, a gesture he used to make as a child whenever he woke from a nightmare. When he finally calmed, I took him to the living room and brought out the file Richard had left behind. The one I had never shown Lucas because I promised Richard I would wait until our son became a man in his own right. "Why did Dad want to keep this a secret?" Lucas asked as I set the file on the table. "Because your father wanted you to be strong enough before taking responsibility," I said. "He believed in you, even if he didn't live long enough to see it." I opened the folder, the transfer documents for the factory, the investments, the shares, the final amended will. Everything had Lucas's name on it, along with one condition: he could only inherit when free from anyone's influence outside the family. When Lucas read that line, his lips pressed together and trembled. I almost lost everything. Because of a few sweet words from her, he whispered. "You weren't wrong, Lucas," I reassured him. "People like Vanessa build walls out of compliments, cages out of fake affection, and chains out of guilt. She knew you valued family, so she turned family into a weapon against you." Lucas dropped his head into his hands, shoulders falling as he finally understood the painful but freeing truth. I was manipulated. A few days later, Lucas went to see a therapist on his own. I didn't push him. I only asked, "Do you want someone to talk to?" He answered immediately, "Yes, I don't want to be the man I became this past year." I watched him walk into the clinic, shoulders straight, steps steady. He had recognized his wound, and those who recognize their wounds always have a chance to heal. One afternoon, Lucas came back with a calmer expression. He placed a new folder on the table. "Mom, I want to run the factory with you, and I want to do it for Dad and for myself, not to prove anything to anyone." I looked at my son, the son I feared I had lost to Vanessa, standing before me with clear eyes for the first time in years. "Your father would be so proud," I said, and I meant it with all my heart. And then, strangely, after months of darkness, I felt light finally slipping back through the cracks inside me. The police soon opened an investigation into Vanessa. From messages, financial evidence, recordings, videos, everything exposed fraud, deception, attempted asset seizure, and violations of several legal statutes. When the news spread, her former victims came forward too. People she had scammed with false romantic promises, clients she misled while posing as an influencer. I didn't rejoice at seeing someone dragged into the light so brutally, but I didn't pity her either. Some people only stop when they are stopped. The night the police took Vanessa in for questioning, Lucas stood beside me at the window, watching the patrol car turn the corner. He said nothing, but he placed his hand over mine, warm, steady. "Mom," he said quietly, "thank you for saving me." I smiled. "No, sweetheart, you saved yourself. I only handed you the lantern." In the weeks that followed, our lives slowly settled into a new rhythm. We ate breakfast together. Each morning, planned improvements for the factory, shared stories about Richard. Every afternoon, Lucas spent an hour in therapy, returning lighter each time. One evening, he sat beside me and said, "Mom, I know I can't erase what I did, but I promise you, I'll never abandon you like that again." I cupped his cheek. "Love doesn't need to be perfect, Lucas. It just needs to be real." The house warmed again. No more heavy silence. No more nights spent alone with a loneliness so deep I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my chest. I began to see real light again, the light of hope, healing, and a family finding its way through the storm. But even as our lives rebuilt themselves, out there was a woman whose darkness did not surrender easily. As I closed my office door to head to bed, my phone buzzed with a new message. "Don't think this is over, Mrs. Harrington." No name, no number, no profile picture, but I recognized that tone instantly. Vanessa Hale wasn't done. That anonymous message that night made me stand still for a while, as if those disembodied words carried a cold draft that slid down my spine. But unlike the early months of fear, this time I didn't tremble, didn't drop my phone, and didn't sit for hours questioning what I had done wrong. I simply looked at the screen for 3 seconds, then set the phone down on the table. I had come too far to fear Vanessa Hale ever again. A few days later, everything began shifting in ways none of us expected. The police called Lucas in to provide more testimony. The evidence I had submitted, combined with statements from her past victims, opened an official investigation, not into Lucas, into Vanessa. The day Vanessa was arrested, I was watering the garden in the backyard. Lucas burst in through the gate, panting as if he had run all the way. "Mom, they arrested her. Vanessa is really under arrest." I set the watering can down and looked at my son. Morning light fell across his face, the kind of light I hadn't seen there in many years, a light of liberation. "Are you sure?" I asked. Lucas nodded repeatedly. "There's video. People are posting it everywhere. She was handcuffed in front of her apartment, Mom. The police listed so many charges: financial fraud, falsifying documents, identity fraud, even conspiracy to seize assets from someone deemed incapacitated." I understood. I didn't feel joy, but somewhere deep inside, a part of me finally exhaled, because my son was finally free from the toxic net Vanessa had thrown over him. Lucas sat beside me on the steps, his arms wrapped around his knees, sighing heavily. "Mom, how could I have been so blind? How did I let her drag me that far?" I placed my hand on his shoulder. "You weren't weak. You were longing to be loved. And Vanessa knew exactly how to exploit that. But now I want to be different," Lucas said, his voice steadier. "I want to rebuild my life from the ground up." I looked at him, the grown man who had once lost his path, now finding it again. And for the first time in years, I saw Richard in his eyes, calm, thoughtful, someone who faced consequences instead of running from them. In the months that followed, Lucas spent most of his days at the factory. He learned to read reports, to manage staff, to stand before a team and make decisions. Some evenings, he came to my house with stacks of documents, drinking tea while asking me questions one by one. How would Dad have handled this? Did you ever do this back then? Am I going in the right direction? I watched my son grow up a second time, not into an adult, but into a man with real strength. One afternoon, Lucas stopped by Richard's factory to check the production line, and there he met Grace Miller. I didn't hear her name from Lucas first, but from an older worker who had once been very close to Richard. "That Grace girl," she said when I visited the factory. "She's truly kind. When Lucas was still hurting, she kept her distance. When he started getting better, she began talking to him. That woman knows boundaries." I only smiled, but something in my heart softened. Unlike Vanessa, who rushed in fast, strong, and cut into Lucas's emptiness to fill it with control, Grace appeared as someone who simply walked beside him. Not ahead, not over him, just beside him. She was 37 with 2 little daughters, Emma and Lily, 2 curly-haired angels who toddled around the factory yard each afternoon while their mother worked overtime. Grace wasn't dazzlingly beautiful or flashy, but she had eyes that listened and a smile shaped by loss, making her cherish every small thing. When I met her in the conference room for the first time, Grace immediately stood up. "Hello, Mrs. Eleanor, I've heard a lot about you," I asked, half teasing. "All good things, I hope?" Grace laughed. "Yes, all things that make me want to learn from you." There wasn't a millimeter of pretense in that smile, and to me, that was more precious than any compliment. From that day, Lucas and Grace talked more, not with the urgency of people clinging to each other out of fear, but with the slow steadiness of 2 people building something real from the ground up. One evening, Lucas came to my house, taking off his coat as his cheeks reddened. "Mom, I invited Grace and the girls for dinner this weekend, if that's okay." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you asking me or asking for my blessing?" Lucas laughed. A laugh filled with a lightness I hadn't heard since long before Vanessa. That dinner became one of the happiest evenings of my life. Emma ran around my living room, touching everything, then turning to me. "Grandma, whose is this?" I laughed. "Your temporary Grandpa Richard's." Everyone burst out laughing. Lily climbed into my lap after dessert as naturally as if I had always been part of her life. "Grandma Eleanor, tell a story," she said, eyes sparkling. I looked at Lucas. He smiled and nodded. So I told them stories about Richard, stories Lucas had heard 100 times, but listened to again that night as if hearing them new. At one moment, Lucas's eyes met Grace's, and I understood that my family was slowly filling back up with a love that wasn't loud but steady. In the months that followed, my house was no longer a quiet, shadowy place. It was full of children's laughter, the sound of dishes clinking at dinner, and the soft music Richard loved at the end of the day. Lucas cared for Emma and Lily as if they were two little stars hung back into a sky that had once gone dark. I became Grandma Eleanor to the girls, a name that warmed my heart. I wasn't their grandmother by blood, but family, I realized, has never been defined solely by blood. It is defined by choice, by who we open our hearts to. One evening, Lucas leaned against the kitchen doorway as I washed dishes. Arms crossed, he smiled. "Mom, lately when I look in the mirror, I see Dad." I paused. "In what way?" "In the way he said, a man becomes grown when he knows how to protect, not control. When he knows how to repent, not blame. When he knows how to stay instead of run." I stood still for a moment. I saw Richard in that sentence. I saw him standing behind Lucas, placing a hand on his shoulder as if he had been waiting a long time for Lucas to return. "Your father is very proud," I whispered. Lucas stepped forward and hugged me from behind, just like when he was a tall, lanky boy who still loved to press his face against my shoulder. "And you pulled me out of the darkest place. I owe you my life." I turned and hugged him. "You owe me nothing. Just live well." And Lucas was living better than ever. As for Vanessa, weeks later she appeared on the evening news. Head down, hair messy, a loose coat barely covering the handcuffs on her wrists. The anchor listed her charges: credit fraud, falsifying documents, identity scams, intentional exploitation of the elderly. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I simply watched, then turned off the TV. Some chapters must be closed before new ones can begin. When everything settled, when the factory became stronger under Lucas's leadership, when Grace and the girls became warm, familiar presences at every dinner, when my once empty home filled with laughter again. I knew I had reached the end of a very long journey, a journey of loss, betrayal, pain, and rebirth. One afternoon, I sat alone in my study. The late sunlight touched the cover of my old wedding album. I placed my hand on it and closed my eyes. Richard, I kept my promise. I protected him. Outside the door came Emma and Lily's voices calling each other, Lucas's laughter following close behind. I got up and opened the door, watching my new family spill through the hallway. Family isn't always blood. Family is who remains when the storm passes. And I knew it was time to close that painful chapter. A chapter full of tears, but also full of strength. I stepped out of the room and joined the laughter outside. A new chapter was beginning. 2 years passed faster than I expected. The light in my life no longer flickered like those stormy days. It stood steady, warm, shining patiently over the small home where Lucas and I found each other again. Every morning I saw a familiar sight on the porch. Lucas driving Richard's old pickup truck out of the gate, carrying the lunch Grace made for him. And every evening he returned to the sound of Emma and Lily running across the yard to greet him. The factory thrived under Lucas's leadership. He introduced improvements, expanded contracts, rebuilt the office wing. Most importantly, he worked with humility, attentiveness, and determination. the very qualities I once feared he had lost during his time with Vanessa. But now, watching him step into life with a steady stride, I understood that sometimes people must walk through a dark forest to recognize the value of sunlight. One spring afternoon, I brought a fresh apple pie to Lucas's office. The smell of cinnamon and warm butter reminded me sharply of Richard. He used to bring pies like this to workers whenever the factory hit an important milestone. Lucas opened the door, his eyes lighting up. "Mom, you really baked this for me." "Of course," I said, setting the pie on the desk. "Your father used to do the same. I'm only continuing the tradition." Lucas fell silent for a moment, then pulled me into a hug. Not the desperate, collapsing hug from that shattered wedding day, but the peaceful embrace of a son who had found his true home again. "Thank you, Mom," he murmured. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I hurt you so much." I stroked his back gently, unwilling to reopen old wounds. "That's what your father wanted, and what I wanted. You came back. That's all that matters." Some nights later, during a light drizzle, I sat down at my old computer to clean up my photo library. I froze when I opened a folder I never wanted to see again. Vanessa. Dozens of photos appeared. Her practiced smiles, her lavish parties, her empty promises. I looked at them one by one, as though seeing ghosts of myself in the years I had been fragile. Without hesitation, I hit delete. As the trash icon spun, it felt as though someone lifted a stone off my chest. No more images of the woman who nearly destroyed my family. No more remnants for old pain to cling to. Only peace remained. I returned to my desk, opened the journal I had kept during the darkest months, and wrote a final line. A truth my heart had taken years to comprehend. I am not a victim. I am a fortress. It was true. I didn't collapse when pushed out of my son's life. I didn't disappear when slandered. I didn't break when loneliness filled every room. I stood up, fought, protected, and reclaimed the light. Lucas, Grace, Emma, and Lily were the greatest gift life returned to me after everything I had lost. We shared dinner together every night. Lucas grilling meat, Grace making salad, the girls running circles around the yard, and me sitting back, grateful for every second. I still believed Richard was watching us from somewhere. I felt his warmth whenever Lucas laughed in that voice so much like his father's. I saw him in the way Lucas placed his hand gently but firmly on the girl's shoulders. Richard was smiling, I knew it. Smiling, proud, and relieved that our family had found its way home. One weekend dinner, we sat around the old wooden table Richard built by hand. The smell of grilled food, the children's giggles, the soft yellow light. It was all so perfect, I paused for a moment just to etch it into my heart. "Grandma Eleanor, tell a story." Emma climbed into my lap. I stroked her hair and began telling a story, my voice slow and full of the breath of happiness. It felt like closing a chapter, not with sorrow, but with completeness. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If my journey reminded you of a pain you once carried, or a hope you're still holding, I would love to know where you're listening from. A small town, a distant state, or a quiet corner of the world. Please share your voice with me in the comments. If this story brought you strength, please like, subscribe, and join me for the next journeys. Every view and every shared moment from you is what allows me to keep telling stories for hearts that have weathered many storms. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for your companionship. Thank you for the warmth you bring to this place. I wish you peace and the quiet strength you've always had.